गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सीमा जी, कैसे हैं आप?
बढ़िया सर, मैं बिल्कुल बढ़िया हूँ। और
विजय, हाउ आर यू? आई कैन सी यू। हाउ आर यू विजय?
I am good, sir. How are you, sir?
आई एम वेरी गुड। तो सर आ गए हैं?
हाँ सर, सर आ गए हैं।
अच्छा।
बस सर 1 मिनट में शुरू करते
हाँ
हैं।
हाँ बिल्कुल। सर का माइक वगैरह टेस्ट कर लिया आपने सब?
हाँ जी,
हाँ
sir.
नमस्कार
सर।
सर।
सर नमस्कार।
Namaste, sir.
Good morning to everyone.
Good morning, sir.
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Good morning, Dr. Mittal. Good morning, Dr. Seema Singh.
गुड मॉर्निंग, वेरी गुड मॉर्निंग सर। वेरी वेरी नाइस टू सी यू। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Truly sir, it's very nice to see you. How are you sir?
I am fine, absolutely fine.
Great. So I think sir in next 1 minute, sharp at 10.
Please.
We'll start. Okay. It is now. Vijay, we can start now, I think.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Honorable Mr. Justice Ashok Bhushan and other distinguished speakers of the day, Professor Raman Mittal, Dr. Seema Singh, students of law joining from across the world, and audience joining across the platforms today. Good morning and a very warm welcome to one and all on the day 2 of the conference. I am Vijay Pujari, convener of the Law and Spirituality Conference. With the goal of exploring the bonds between law and spirituality, the international conference was graced by speakers from across the globe. Day 1 of the conference brought out unknown threads of linkage between law and spirituality, spanning across the realms of theology, quantum physics, ancient Indian traditions, and many more. The virtual conference was inaugurated by His Excellency, Governor of Kerala, Shri Arif Mohammed Khan, and Honorable Mr. Justice R.C. Lahoti, the 35th Chief Justice of India. Through his address, His Excellency cited ancient manuscripts and traditions, highlighting their powerful attempt to humanize divinity and divinize humanity. His Excellency vividly contemplated Indian spiritual thought and reinstated the supremacy over the Western constitutional thought. Justice Ramesh Chandra Lahoti laid down an emphasis on the goals of constitution makers, which are brought forward through the preamble of the Constitution. Justice Lahoti observed that these goals do not merely textually exist textually or legally, but they are deeply imbibed in the spiritual ethos of India. Justice Lahoti emphasizes the need of self-realization among the legislatures to harmonize these laws of the land in tune with the principles of Indian Parliament. Justice Kamlesh Patel beautifully highlighted how the cure of criminality is not to be sought in the genetic code of the delinquent or treating the convicts like savage, but it is to be found in the realms of spirituality. The underlying theme was carried forward by K. Parameswaran, who dealt with the concept of spiritual awakening and how experiences gained through these help us realize the goals of liberty, equality, fraternity in a holistic and a natural way. The next speaker, Mr. Shivakumar Rajgopala, took a unique route of explaining the theories of justice and punishment that are deeply enshrined in the Indian traditions. He further highlighted the individuals in the legal provisions of spirituality have solemn duty to embrace the role as a custodians of this culture. The penultimate session was addressed by Mr. Rodrigo Labato, joining from Brazil, who accentuated the need to go above and beyond the idea of natural law, using the lens of quantum physics and science to inspect the relationship between constitution and spirituality. He brilliantly brings out the dimension where the law is not mere words on paper, but underlying them are the values as complex products of energy. His ideas comparing the principles of Einstein, Newton, and laws of physics in space-time with spirituality promises to break new grounds. The final session of day 1 was addressed by Mr. Venkatramani, who brought out how through centuries of Western colonialism, Indian spiritual thought process, which beautifully imbibed law, has been alienated and relegated to a backseat. The capitalist ideas now deeply percept the society, and there is a need to replace them again with Indian school of philosophical thoughts. Mr. Venkatramani dealt with the idea that we should not only deal with the reason or quest, should go to the higher realms of spirituality for peaceful existence. Carrying forward the soul of day 1 with a new lease of wisdom and wise, allow me to introduce our first speaker of the day, Honorable Mr. Justice Ashok Bhushan, who was the former Judge of the Supreme Court of India and 31st Chief Justice of Kerala High Court. Justice Bhushan is considered one of the most reverential and human judges of the Supreme Court. Few of his landmarks judgments include Aadhaar right to privacy matter, Ayodhya title dispute matter, in the migrant labor matter, where Justice Bhushan's effort to mitigate the sufferings and hunger of the people during the pandemic created a lasting positive impact on the migrant crisis during the worst pandemic this world has ever seen. Justice Bhushan, you are incredibly welcome to this conference. Over to you, sir.
Distinguished members of the faculty of Campus Law Center, University of Delhi, members of the Ethiccraft Club, Dr. Seema Singh, Conference Director and Assistant Professor, Campus Law Center, University of Delhi, Professor Raman Mittal, Professor in Charge, Campus Law Center and Ethiccraft Club, members of the legal fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. A good morning, everyone attending the e-conference. I consider myself very fortunate and highly honored to be here with you today in the International E-Conference, the purpose of which is to deliberate on the subject law and spirituality, exploring the bonds. I take this opportunity to congratulate the organizers of this conference for choosing the above topic, considering the relevancy in the present day scenario. I especially congratulate Dr. Seema Singh for organizers of the conference for such a useful event to bring together so many experts and learned dignitaries on one platform. Though I am not an expert to speak on the subject chosen with my limited knowledge, I will try to my best to share with you some of my ideas and thoughts on the topic law and spirituality, exploring the bonds. Before going deep into the subject, let me explain the plain meaning of law and spirituality. According to Oxford English Dictionary, law is the system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its member, which it may enforce by the imposition of penalty. The expression law is universally used to denote a common concept throughout the world. In ancient Indian context, the expression law was known as dharma. Dharma is what is firm and durable, what sustains and maintains, what hinders failing applied to the universe. Dharma signifies the eternal laws which maintain the world. Dharma is the action which permits man to realize his destiny to the full, sustain him in his life, and assures his well-being after death. By its own virtue, that and produces a spiritual benefit for him who has performed it, which will necessarily bear fruit in the other world. In pre-Christian area, dharma rests primarily and essentially on Veda. It was codified by different sages with dharma sutras, and namely Dharma Sutra by Gautam, Dharma Sutra by Vashishta, Vishnu Sutra and others, and of course the Manu Smriti. In the modern world, relevancy and importance of dharma is although still there, but law which governs the society is law enacted by competent legislature and laws declared by High Court and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court of India had occasion to interpret the expression law on many occasions. Dr. A.K. Shikri speaking for Supreme Court in Badshah versus Urmila Badshah Godse 2014, 1 SCC 188 and paragraph 16 stated High Court. The law regulates relationship between people. It prescribes patterns of behavior. It reflects the values of society. The role of the court is to understand the purpose of law in society and to help the law achieve its purpose. But the law of society is a living organism. It is based on a given factual and social reality that is constantly changing. Sometimes change in law precedes societal change and it even intended to stimulate it. In most cases, however, a change in law is the result of change in social reality. Indeed, when social reality changes, the law must change too. Just as change in social reality is the law of life, responsiveness to change in social reality is the life of the law. It can be said that history of law is the history of shaping the law to the society's changing needs. In both constitutional and statutory interpretation, the court is supposed to exercise discretion in determining the proper relationship between the subjective and objective purpose of the law. Nigam Dharmadhikari J in the state of MP versus Jaybir Singh, 2005, 5 SCC, page 1 in paragraph 34, elaborating the concept of the law stated, I quote, the spirit of the law is not to be searched in the ideology or philosophy which might have inspired it, but it may be found in the experience of the people who made and put it into practice. Justice K. Ramaswamy defines law as a social engineering and an instrument of social change evolved by a gradual and continuous process. In A.S. Narayan Dikshuli versus State of Andhra Pradesh, 1996, 9 SCC 548, in paragraph 90, he stated, law is a social engineering and an instrument of social change evolved by a gradual and continuous process. History and custom, utility and accepted standards of right conduct are the forms which singly or in combination shall be progress of law. Law is universally acknowledged as a regulator of human conduct. As the society and nation advances, they require regulations to regulate the conduct of people to obtain maximum benefit to society and the nation. It was belief of all nations, the society based to law will make this world a better place to live. This quote in MC Mehta versus Union of India, 1992, 1 SCC 358 in paragraph 3 stated, law is a regulator of human conduct as the professor of jurisprudence say, but no law can indeed effectively work unless there is an element of acceptance by the people in society. No law works out smoothly unless the interaction is voluntary. In order that human conduct may be in accordance with the prescription of law, it is awareness about what the law requires, and there is an element of acceptance that the acceptance and the requirement of law is grounded upon a philosophy which should be followed. This would be possible only when steps are taken in an adequate measure to make people aware of the indisputable necessity of this conduct being oriented in accordance with the requirement of law. The expression law came to be explained in Article 13(3) of the Constitution of India, which provides law includes any ordinance, order, bylaw, rule, regulation, notification, custom or usage having in the territory of India in the force of law. A very wide definition is provided in the Constitution. Law is explained in somewhat similar manner in other countries. Constitution and is a concept well known to the legal fraternity, which need no further elaboration. The word spirituality is formed from the word spirit. The word spirit comes from the Latin word spiritus, meaning to breathe. The Oxford Advanced Learner's Dictionary defines spirit as the part of the person that includes their mind, feelings, and character rather than their body, unquote. Same dictionary defines the word spiritual as connected with the human spirit rather than the body or physical things. Spirituality is a unique state of mind of an individual to follow the righteous path in the journey of life. Broadly speaking, a person who is having a spiritual mindset will obey the rules recognized by his society and community without any reluctance. After knowing the meaning of above words, naturally the question that comes before us is what is law and what is spirituality? Law is the cement of society and also an essential medium of change. Knowledge of law increases one's understanding of public affairs. Its study promotes accuracy of expression, facility in argument, and skill in interpreting the written word, as well as some understanding of social values. Law forms an integral part of the society as it assists in the creation and maintenance of social order. The most obvious way in which law contributes to the maintenance of social order is the way in which it deals with disorder or conflict. Society and law are closely related to each other. Law also changes with social changes and plays an important role in the fulfillment of social needs. Law has a functional role to perform in an ever-growing society. From its inception, law has been at work shaping and reshaping the social order. In the present day scenario, the main function of law is to act as an effective instrument of social engineering. Law has its strongest place in the society where there are different kinds of interests which must be balanced against each other. The word law gains importance where it stands with the word justice. Justice means exercise of authority in maintenance of right. Law is an instrument by which justice can be achieved. In other words, justice is the administration of what is due to a person. Justice is divided mainly into legal justice and natural justice. Justice legal refers to justice governed by the positive law of the state, and moral justice arises when justice is governed by the natural law or law of moral conscience. Of the two, legal justice is always preferred over natural justice. The success of a legal system depends mainly upon the character and conduct of its stakeholder. The character and conduct of an individual is a reflection of his or her mindset. In this process, control of mind is very essential. The spiritual is a person whose spirits are high. The understanding and the usage prescribed to the expression at present is one whose actions lean towards divinity. I may quote Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, former President of India, who claims that all human beings carry divinity inside themselves. I quote Dr. Kalam, quote, I do believe that all human beings carry divinity inside themselves and that this can lift us out of confusion, misery, melancholy, and failure, and indeed guide us when it is enacted, unquote. Hindu scriptures contain the concept of Atma and Paramatma, and Atma is regarded nothing but form of Paramatma. Dr. Kalam in his book Transcendence emphatically says, I quote, I realize that a divine life can have no base unless we recognize the eternal spirit as the inhabitant of this bodily mansion and integrate all of which the eternal spirit is comprised. That all those living on this planet Earth, around me, away from me, in my country, in other country, even other species and vegetarian and minerals are all different forms of a great unity. At the most elementary level, all nature is one. Only one noble material weaves constantly different garbs. Dr. Kalam exhorted all human beings to ignite our spirituality. He says that for us to ignite our spirituality, we need to look forward and transcend our egos. We need to recognize, connect with and integrate the eternal spirit within all pursuit of human being are to obtain happiness. Oswald Chambers, early 20th century Scottish Baptist, proclaimed, I quote, holiness, not happiness, is the chief end of a man, unquote. Dr. Kalam in same book, Transcendence, says that spiritual component spreads the values to be inculcated by human being for promoting a good human life and welfare of society while pursuing material life, unquote. Dr. Kalam was regarded as great scholar and scientist by the country. He, after his experiences, said that, I quote, a place of worship is a bridge to connect us to a world beyond the physical, unquote. He stated that true spiritual place help us to transcend the world of man, connect to God and attain enlightenment. Regular and sincere prayers can elevate the mind and help one to experience the divine. Thus, spirituality is a goal which all men should endeavor to attain to raise themselves from wear, tear and worries of this world. I may clarify that for being a spiritual, a man is not to renounce the world or become a sannyasi. All men, while discharging their normal duties in this world, can march toward spirituality. Spirituality is a state after attaining which every man is at peace with himself and the world. Democritus, a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher, stated, I quote, happiness resides not in possession and not in gold. Happiness dwells in the soul, unquote. Brilliant words of Leo Tolstoy contains the silver lining amongst dark clouds. In his beautiful poem, Leo Tolstoy says, I quote, where there is a faith, there is a love. Where there is a love, there is a peace. Where there is a peace, there is a God. And where there is a God, there is no need, unquote. Importance of spiritual life has been emphasized by Gautam Buddha when he states, just as a candle cannot burn without the fire, man cannot live without a spiritual life, unquote. What is purpose and aim of our journey in this world has been succinctly explained by Gary Jugo, a spiritual teacher and author. He states, I quote, the purpose of our journey on this precious earth is now to align our personalities with our souls. It is to create harmony, cooperation, sharing, and reverence for life. It is to grow spirituality. This is our new evolutionary pathway, unquote. Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 45 said, Sve sve karmana bhirta sansit labhate narah swa karma nirta siddhi tatha vindat tachunu. Verse translated in English means, for performing attentively one's own activities, man attains spiritual function. Listen as to how one engaged in his own duty reaches perfection. The Bhagavad Gita emphasizes on spiritual introspection to decipher the true object of life. In chapter 13, verse 12, Lord Krishna says, Adhyatma jnana nityatvam tattva jnanartha darshanam yajjan divita proktam jnanam yadoto anyatha. Verse translated in English means, being constantly given to spiritual introspection, perceiving the true object of life as determined by the tenets of spiritual wisdom, all these together constitute true wisdom. Everything else is sheer ignorance. Spirituality is the stage at which control of minds take place. Practice of yoga and meditation are some of the tools to gain spiritual power. We know for scaling the heights of any profession, a strong and healthy mind is required. Nowadays, yoga and meditation are taught in all educational institutions. Yoga training has become part and parcel of the syllabus in judicial institutions like state judicial academies. It is because of the importance of yoga in our personal life, June 21 is observed as International Yoga Day. In order to get happiness in personal life and to excel in one's professional career, irrespective of whether it is legal, medical, teaching, or other field, he or she must be equipped with spiritual power, which is gained through practice of tools like yoga, meditation, etc. Practice of meditation develops our power of introspection. We can clearly see the working of the mind and also the range of our vision. It also develops the power of concentration, which is the great source of knowledge. The more the power of concentration, the greater is the power of acquiring knowledge. Concentration means conservation of energy. Friends, we know that mind is just a function of the body or some kind of bodily condition. The tendency is to unite the mind with body or align the body with the mind. Naturally, mind has been distinguished from matter. The nature of the mind is very difficult to understand because the mind is very subtle as well as hidden. The importance of the human mind cannot be overestimated. Man's progress, material, intellectual, aesthetic, moral, and spiritual depends on development of the mind. Mind is the cause of bondage and also the cause of freedom. If the mind is well cared to complete freedom, but if the mind is uncared for, untrained and undeveloped, then one remains in bondage. Our happiness and unhappiness, knowledge and ignorance, success and failure, strength and weakness depend on the nature of the mind. Our outer achievements are but a manifestation of our inner attainment. It is because of the superiority of the mind that humanity is superior to all other living creatures. Mind is said to be one's greatest friend as well as one's worst enemy. If the mind is fully controlled, then it will prove to be your best friend. But if you lose control over the mind, it will prove to be your worst enemy. Our strength and weakness, happiness and unhappiness, knowledge and ignorance, freedom and bondage, all depend on the nature or condition of the mind. And physical health, to attain knowledge in anything, we have to practice control of the mind. The mind, because it is made of pure substance, can transmit consciousness. It is pure substance, its very nature is pure. Extraneous things that have gathered in the subconscious and conscious mind cause disturbances. The first thing is to rectify them by the exercise of reason, to clear the mind of wrong and let the right remain. As stated before, the first necessary is to find an ideal, a great ideal in life that you can hold to and devote yourself wholeheartedly to the attainment. This is the great secret of self-control. It will lead to the power of discrimination. The power of discrimination will develop your power, your willpower, and that will enable you to control the emotions also. Both emotions and reason are necessary, but the emotions must be controlled by will. So far as legal profession is concerned, in the 21st century, with its expanding globalization, law has ceased to be a traditional profession. Now it is a highly specialized field of education. Education in law is no more an option of last resort. It is now a coveted course of professional education. Obviously, due to drastic changes in the field of judiciary, the position of the lawyer has become very important in society. So also, the responsibilities of the lawyer to strictly follow the rules of ethics in his or her professional life has increased tremendously. Duty, only when such an attitude to respect for law and respect for the courts which administer law is developed in one's mind, he or she can be said to be successful in his or her profession. This can be possible only when that person is fully equipped with strong spiritual power. The spiritual power is not a thing which can be acquired on a fine morning or within a short span of time. Anybody can acquire spiritual power provided that person has got the willpower to acquire the same through regular practice of the supporting tools. For example, if we take legal profession, apart from discharging his duties, the lawyer has a large responsibility towards the society. An ideal advocate should believe that legal profession has an element of service and associates with legal service activities. Ultimately, what makes a law graduate an ideal advocate is the spiritual mind that he or she possesses. The mindset that a lawyer develops from his spiritual power makes him to obey the rules of ethics while pursuing his professional career. Every profession by its nature is noble, but the question that may be posed is what makes a profession noble? The answer is simple. The attitude and mindset of the member of that profession to follow the path of righteousness and to obey the rules of ethics. In this context, I would like to remind my brothers and sisters who are attending this e-conference that first of all, you should focus your attention in shaping your technological skill in order to survive and excel in the profession chosen by you, as you are being forced to work on virtual platform on account of the pandemic situation preventing in our country and the entire world. For few words also need to be stated about interrelation of law and spirituality. The organizers of this e-conference in introduction of the subject has very succinctly crystallized the scheme in following words. I quote, "Spirituality is the progenitor of ethics and morality, which is in turn have always provided a context for determining the validity of laws. Development of the legal system therefore has an imprint of a spiritual process which seeks to promote peace, harmony, and reduction of conflict in society. A society would flourish more with amity and happiness where law is in tune with spirituality, while more conflicts have been observed in society where law denies spirituality." His Excellency, the Governor of Kerala, in his inaugural address, referred to a story by Munshi Premchand, that is Panch Parameshwar, which gives a message about the function of Panch, that is of a judge, as a spiritual function. In earlier period of our country, function of the law was manifestation of spirituality. When aim of human life is to attain peace and enlightenment, our laws which are to regulate human conduct should be such which may facilitate all human beings to achieve the highest good. As said earlier, a spiritual person shall be more keen to follow the law and conduct himself according to dharma. The lawgivers may keep inside the spiritual aspect of life while making the law. The goal of all organizations and society, all parts of government, including legislature, is to ensure that first, laws made are voluntarily obeyed. Secondly, laws made may bring maximum peace and happiness amongst its subjects. And thirdly, laws made may not be in conflict with spiritual attainment by its subject. From the above discussion, it is crystal clear that a bond exists between law and spirituality, which cannot be separated. If we try to separate them, it will seriously affect the very existence of one or other. Now, time has come to wind up my speech. I am sure participation in this 3-day e-conference will help you all to improve your knowledge and skill, thereby equip you to face the present day challenges with more confidence and vigor. May I conclude with a celestial song by Mahakavi Kalidas, which contains a benediction for human welfare, the translation of which is as follows, I quote: May all overcome their difficulties, may all experience bliss, may all fulfill their wishes, may all rejoice everywhere, unquote. Thank you, Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir, for this brilliant exposition. And I would invite Professor Raman Mittal, sir. Raman Mittal, sir, it's over to you to say something, and then I will formally propose the vote of thanks to Honorable Justice Ashok.
Okay. Thank you, Justice Ashok Bhushan ji, for guiding us to the theme of the conference. Law is the cement of the society, as mentioned by you, and definitely an instrument of change. It shapes and reshapes the social order. It is an instrument of social engineering. Law is certainly an instrument through which justice can be achieved. It's a means to an end. And as a candle cannot burn without fire, a man cannot live without spirituality. That's what you quoted from Gautam the Buddha. Thank you so much for tracing the relationship between law and religion, which is the theme of the conference. We are really beholden to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. And I was constantly in touch with you, and I was constantly disturbing you also. And truly, sir, 2 points which you have mentioned, and I think which are very much important, but we don't consider it very seriously when we discuss law. And that 2 aspects which you discussed about law, the legal and the natural justice. So understanding natural justice without understanding spirituality is not possible. And अभी मुझे एक चीज याद आ रही है कि भीष्म पितामह ने बोला था कि भारत में एक समय ऐसा था, ना राजा था, ना राज्य था, ना कोई दंड करता था, ना दंड नीति थी, और ये इसलिए होता था क्योंकि हर कोई अपने अपने कर्तव्यों का पालन करता था. So definitely the society was spiritually so much elevated and so much enlightened, and obviously mere legislation cannot bring changes unless and until the people are able to understand their duties and to understand that spirituality can definitely play a very instrumental role. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you from all of us. And I will stay in touch with you because we have to discuss some more things with you over this topic. So with this, sir, I extend my regards and thanks both to you. Thank you so much.
May I have permission to leave because I have other places.
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Please.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, I think he left. अच्छा sir, Ashok Mehta sir भी यहाँ पे हैं.
हाँ, yes, yes. He is mine.
अच्छा.
सर आप बता सकते हैं सर, but it is पास में रहने के बाद भी आज 2 साल बाद आपसे वर्चुअल वे में ही मिल पाए.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta. All the best, everybody. Okay, bye.
Over to you, Kajal.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would like to introduce our next keynote speaker, Mr. Ashok Mehta, Senior Advocate. Mr. Mehta formerly served as the Additional Solicitor General of India at Allahabad High Court. And Mr. Mehta is the Organizing Secretary of Mediation and Conciliation Center of Allahabad High Court since 2008. We are honored to have you, sir, and we welcome you to this conference. We thank you for accepting our invitation and for agreeing to address this conference. Over to you, sir.
सभी आभासीय दर्शकों को मेरा प्रणाम। ऐसा भी एक तरीका होता है कि मैं दुनिया हूं, मैं आप सबकी उम्र में नहीं सोचा था। साथ से कहीं ना कहीं कि ये अपने आप में एक आध्यात्मिक पार्ट, भारत एक आध्यात्मिक राष्ट्र, इंडिया इज ए स्पिरिचुअल नेशन, विश्वास ही नहीं होता था। लेकिन डॉक्टर रमन, आई एम रियली ग्रेटफुल टू यू एंड डॉक्टर सीमा, आपने मुझे ये अपॉर्चुनिटी दी कि मैं इस विषय पे कुछ कह सकूं। द बेस्ट वॉज नॉट कि मैं कुछ कह पा रहा हूं, द बेस्ट वॉज कि ऑनरेबल गवर्नर, ऑनरेबल एक्स चीफ जस्टिस ऑफ इंडिया, ऑनरेबल सुप्रीम कोर्ट जज आरिफ मोहम्मद जी को, लाहौटी को सुनने का कल मौका मिला, और आज अशोक भूषण जी को सुनने का मौका मिला। आगे आने वाले समय में ऑनरेबल मिस्टर जस्टिस इकबाल अहमद अंसारी जी भी हमारे बीच हैं। शुभ, वसंत, दीपक, yes, it is a great opportunity to hear the new mind. एक और व्यक्तित्व सामने नजर आ रहा है, नाम उसका, मैं उनको ब्रिज बिहारी दास के रूप में जानता हूं, और मुझे जोड़ा गया है मीडिएशन के साथ, मध्यस्थता के साथ। तो स्पिरिचुअलिटी ऑफ मीडिएशन जो है वो मुझे ब्रिज बिहारी दास, ब्रियन ब्रॉश ने ही सिखाई। लवली, इज ग्रेट। Spirituality is connected with soul and spirit. आत्मा से जुड़ा हुआ प्रश्न। Spirituality refines everyone's thought, expression and belief, and clarifies the faith. Spirituality has a sense of purpose, feeling and relationship. Spirituality is full of wisdom, excellence and values. Spirituality produces prudence in it, is wisdom, excellence and values. It is metaphysical. It is Platonic. Spirituality connects everyone with nature. My nature, मेरा व्यवहार प्रकृति के साथ, व्यक्ति के साथ, एक व्यक्ति का दूसरे व्यक्ति के साथ, समाज के साथ, जीव जंतु प्राणी, पर्यावरण, इस यूनिवर्स के साथ। जैसे जैसे सोचता जाता हूं, और लेवल के ऊपर हम सब पहुंच जाते हैं। इट इज हार्मोनी विद नेचर। इट रिक्वायर्स कंपैशन फॉर ऑल क्रीचर्स। इट डेवलप्स, the spirituality develops a spirit of inquiry, reform and scientific temper, and humanism. Whatever I have said, are we finding ये शब्द अपने संविधान? हम ड्यूटीज में भी इन शब्दों को पाते हैं, प्रेम इन शब्दों को पाते हैं, डायरेक्टिव प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ स्टेट पॉलिसी में इनको पाते हैं, आर्टिकल 51 में इंटरनेशनल लेवल के ऊपर। मेरा संविधान आध्यात्मिक संविधान। It is a lively, it develops with time, it develops with nature. It connects individual, family, kutum, cluster, society and nation, and moves towards universe. मैं स्पष्ट और साफ रूप में अगली लाइन बोलने जा रहा हूं। आध्यात्मिक भारत ही परम वैभव प्राप्त करेगा और विश्व गुरु बनेगा। What it means? It means destiny has called upon us, the Bharat, to lead the world. The world is groping in dark after the miserable failure of all thought systems. Everyone is groping to find out a new thing. It's a divine responsibility of Bharat to show the third way, the only way, the spiritual way. This necessitates tremendous homework and equipment. और आज की यह कार्यशाला, ये कॉन्फ्रेंस, इनिशिएशन है एक नए भारतीय विचार, विमर्श का, डिस्कशन और नए विचारों की अनुभूति का। फ्रेश is necessary. I am repeating. एक नई सोच on all legal and constitutional matters, all aspects, the law, the legal system, the constitution, the institutional framework, and above all, the psychology of all those involved in this process. हमें व्यक्ति की सोच को बदलना होगा, व्यक्ति के सोचने के तरीके को बदलना होगा। All must be thoroughly changed. It is to be marched in the light of universal laws. Such a Bharat will promote peace and security to maintain harmonious, honorable relations between nations. ऐसा आध्यात्मिक भारत, ऐसे ही आध्यात्मिक भारत की आज विश्व को आवश्यकता है। आध्यात्म क्रिएटर का विषय है, क्रिएटर की खोज का विषय। ये सृष्टि की रचना किसने करी, उसे ढूंढ पाना असंभव है। क्यों? क्योंकि जितने भी हम हैं, सोचने वाले हैं, समझने वाले हैं, वो उस परमात्मा के क्रिएटर के बाद की क्रिएशन है। लेकिन एक ऋग्वेद में ही नासदीय श्लोक है, तो मेरे को बहुत ही अच्छी लगती है। उसका एक भाग अभी कहा, लेकिन उसका सबसे बढ़िया भाग मुझे लगता है, मैं पहले कोट कर रहा हूं अंग्रेजी में। ओ स्कॉलर, whether sustain creator or not, रचनाकार द्वारा बनाए रखा जा रहा है इस रचना को या नहीं, is known only to him means the creator। लेकिन अगली लाइन ने सब कुछ बदल दिया। शायद उसको मालूम है, नहीं मालूम है, यह भी नहीं मालूम। अध्यात्म उस स्तर, आध्यात्म आत्मा से जुड़ा हुआ है, आध्यात्म सोल से जुड़ी हुई है, स्पिरिचुअलिटी स्पिरिट से जुड़ी हुई है। आत्मा एक है, अमर है। इसको भारत के संविधान में कैसे लाओगे? तो आइए गांधी से शुरू करते हैं। 1948 के करीब एक ताबीज उन्होंने ढूंढा था, एक तलिस्मा ढूंढा था और कहा था कि सबसे गरीब और कमजोर आदमी के लिए आपका कदम अपने आप स्वराज को पाने वाला कदम। Recall the face of the poorest and weakest man whom you have seen. Ask yourself to step you contemplate to take is going to be of any use to that person, to him. Will he gain anything by it? Will it restore him to a control over his own life and destiny? In other words, will it lead to Swaraj for hungry and spirituality? Starving millions, then you will find your doubts and yourself melting away. तो दिया, लेकिन क्या हमारे सिस्टम में ये कहीं आया है? ना कृष्णा अय्यर ने इसको याद किया था और एक नहीं 3-3 जजमेंट्स में इसको साइट किया। नर सेवा, नारायण सेवा एक विषय है। बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर की हम बात करते हैं। समाज के बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर की इकाई क्या है? के गुरु जॉन रॉल्स हुए हैं, उनका अपना कहना है इंडिविजुअल कन्वर्टेड इनटू फैमिली इज पार्ट ऑफ बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर। पॉलिटिकल पावर इन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल regime is also power of equal citizens as a collective body, the member of which share certain final ends to which they give very much priority. हमारी प्रायोरिटी क्या है? कल आई वो बात। हमारी प्रायोरिटी उन गोल्स को अचीव करना है जो हमारे प्रियम्बल में है, और संविधान के साथ स्पिरिचुअलिटी, शायद कल जो शब्द थे वो अपने आप में लाहौटी जी के अमर शब्द हैं। और उनका ये कहना कि भारत के संविधान में अगर कहीं कोई डाउट हो तो उद्देश्य का को पढ़ो, समझने की कोशिश करो और इंटरप्रेट करो। संविधान में जितने डाउट हैं वो दूर हो जाए। लेकिन भारतीय संविधान में कुछ चीजें हैं जो एक धागे की तरह बुनी हुई है, एक रेशम की साड़ी में बुनी हुई। वो है स्पिरिट ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी, सोशल रिवॉल्यूशन और प्रिजर्वेशन ऑफ इंटीग्रिटी एंड यूनिटी, मेकिंग इट टू बी ए फ्रेटर्निटी। ये फ्रेटर्निटी इज सीमलेस वेब में कहीं ओमनी प्रेजेंट है, कहीं नहीं दिखती है, लेकिन हर जगह है। और उसको शब्द दिया ग्रेनवेल ऑस्टिन ने 1997 में वर्किंग ऑफ ए डेमोक्रेटिक कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, जब उनकी किताब आई तो उसमें उसको शब्द दिया कल्चर। हिंदी करेंगे तो संस्कृति होगी। अभी एक वैभव का शब्द आता है कि हमारा अपना वैभव परम पे पहुंचे। तो अभी डॉक्टर ने एक लाइन कही कि भीष्म पितामह ने कहा है कि न राज रह जाए तो तेरे की। समाज अपने आप अपने रिश्तों के साथ उच्चतम स्तर के ऊपर चलता चला जाए, ये परम है, ये यूटोपिया है। और इस यूटोपिया को मैं नाम देता हूं विराट। जिस दिन समाज की आत्मा, समाज की स्पिरिचुअलिटी उस तक पहुंच जाएगी, उस विराट तक पहुंच जाएगी, तो अपने आप मेरा देश उस अपने परम पे भी पहुंच जाएगा। सच में वो चीज सामने आ जाएगी जिसमें धीरे धीरे मैं उस हायर लेवल ऑफ एंडेवर और अचीवमेंट पे पहुंच जाऊंगा जिसके बाद मैं दुनिया का विश्व गुरु बन जाऊंगा। इनमें किन चीजों को जोड़ा जा सकता है? ओके, आइए दूसरे धर्मों की बात कर लेते हैं। पहले किन चीजों को जोड़ा जाए तो जो हमारी वर्च्यूज हैं, जो हमारे गुण हैं, जो हमारी वैल्यूज हैं, वो विजडम की ओर बढ़ती हैं। विजडम को पहचानने में ग्रीक्स ने पहचाना उसको करेज से, जस्टिस से और नोबल वर्च्यूज से। इसका कंट्रास्ट है क्रिश्चियंस। उनके लिए वर्च्यूज हैं लव, काइंडनेस, ह्यूमैनिटी, पेशेंस। इस्लाम ने काफी ग्रेट स्ट्रेस दिया सबमिशन टू गॉड, ब्रदरहुड एंड चैरिटी। बुद्धा बात करते हैं करुणा की, मैत्री की, मुद्रित की, उपेक्षा की। तो ताओइज्म बात करते हैं हार्मोनी की विद नेचर। एक और नाम है कन्फ्यूशियस। वो जेंटलमैनली बिहेवियर के ऊपर बहुत ज्यादा ध्यान देते। हम बात करते हैं सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः। क्या है? स्पिरिचुअलिटी के 4 हिस्से हैं। हम आज उसमें से 2 हिस्सों पे बात कर रहे हैं। भगवान से, ईश्वर से मेरा रिश्ता क्या होगा, एक आध्यात्म है। उसको पाने के लिए मेरे तरीके क्या होंगे, ये भी एक भाग है। मेरे रिचुअल्स, वो भी उसी से जुड़े हुए हैं। लेकिन आज हम बात कर रहे हैं एक आदमी का दूसरे आदमी के साथ रिश्ता क्या होगा, ये भी आध्यात्म। और इसी से बनता है कल्चरल एंड सोशल रिलेशनशिप। और जब इस एस्पेक्ट के साथ मैं रिलीजन की बात करता हूं, पंथ की बात करता हूं, कल्ट की बात करता हूं, तो इंग्लिश लॉ के अंदर 1883 में ही मैं मानता हूं, कॉलरिज ने बोला शब्द रिलीजन ऑफ मैन। और मेरे यहाँ 1954 में आया रिलीजन इज सर्टेनली ए मैटर ऑफ फेथ विद इंडिविजुअल और कम्युनिटी, नॉट थीस्टिक। भगवान में विश्वास करने वाला होना आवश्यक नहीं है रिलीजन होने के लिए। और 83 में involves conscience and a matter to be professed, practiced and propagated. नर नारायण बन जाता है, नर सेवा नारायण सेवा हो जाती है। और ये इनेट लॉ, ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन और ये वैल्यूज, ये विजडम्स, ये परम हो जाती है। परमात्मा जब ये परम पाती हैं तो परमात्मा बन जाती है। तब क्या होता है? परमार्थ के कारण साधुन धरा शरीर। फिर वो 10 गुण आ जाते हैं जो धर्म के लक्षण बनाए गए हैं: धृति, क्षमा, दमो, स्ते, शौच, इंद्रिय निग्रह, धी, विद्या, सत्य, क्रोध। गांधी जी ने इन्हीं इथिकल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस को बड़े प्यारे 7 शब्दों में कहा, वी मस्ट टेक केयर दैट मस्ट बी पॉलिटिक्स प्रिंसिपल्स। Politics has to be with principles. Pleasure has to be with conscience. Knowledge has to be with character. Commerce has to be with morality. Wealth has to be with work. Science has to be with humanity. And worship त्याग के साथ होनी चाहिए। इनमें और जो fairness, self-discipline, humanity, courage, अगर इन सबको जोड़ दिया जाए तो ये प्रिवेंटिव जूरिस्प्रूडेंस नहीं है क्या? अगर ऐसा हो जाए तो क्या वो नहीं होगा कि न्यायालय की आवश्यकता ही नहीं रह जाएगी? नीति और न्याय, ये दो शब्द आते हैं, यहीं पे मैं उस बात को कह देता हूं। नीति इज द पॉलिसी, लॉ इज इट्स मेथड ऑफ एनफोर्समेंट, और न्याय रियलिटी में समाज के अंदर उस पॉलिसी का फायदा किस रूप में पहुंच रहा है, उसको हम न्याय कहते हैं। प्रिएम्बल में 3 तरह से कहा है, जस्टिस, पॉलिटिकल, सोशल एंड इकोनॉमिक। ये लिमिटेशन नहीं है, ये एक्सपेंशन है, और आगे बढ़ता चला जाएगा। इसके बाद ये जो पर्सनल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस है, जो इंडिविजुअलिस्टिक एथिकल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस है, या एस्थेटिकल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस बनती है, फैमिली जूरिस्प्रूडेंस बनती है, और फैमिली से अलग स्टेप है, उसको सोसाइटल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस बना देता है, सोशल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस बना देता है, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस बना देता है, प्रोफेशनल जूरिस्प्रूडेंस बना देता है, कॉर्पोरेट जूरिस्प्रूडेंस बना देता है। उनकी सबकी अपनी। जी हाँ, गाड़ी बनती है, एक ब्रेक में जरा सी गड़बड़ होती है कि 50,000 लाख गाड़ी ली जाती है। कॉर्पोरेट की जूरिस्प्रूडेंस नहीं है क्या? कॉमर्स की जूरिस्प्रूडेंस नहीं है क्या? और जब ये सारे जुड़ जाते हैं तो हम इसको ह्यूमन जूरिस्प्रूडेंस कहते हैं। और ह्यूमन जूरिस्प्रूडेंस, भारत का संविधान हो या ना हो, वह एक लॉ जो 5,000 सालों पहले से चले आ रहे हैं भारत में, वह तब भी रहेंगे। भारत का संविधान उन अधिकारों को, उन धर्म के ड्यूटीज को, कर्म को रिकॉग्नाइज करता है, एक्नॉलेज करता है। राइट ऑफ लाइफ आर्टिकल 21 नहीं है, डिलीटेड। तो क्या नहीं रह जाएगा? एक उदाहरण देता हूं, आर्टिकल 31 राइट ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी, मैं हिंदी करता हूं, संपदा का अधिकार, डिलीटेड। तो क्या वायु, जल, ऊर्जा, ये पांचों संपदाओं का अधिकार हर व्यक्ति जो भी देश में है, जो भी इस संसार में है, उसका रहेगा कि नहीं रहेगा? उत्तर है हाँ। लाइफ अधिकार भी रहेगा, संपदा का अधिकार भी रहेगा, चाहे डिलीट हो जाए। तो भारत का संविधान हमारे उन सनातन मूल्यों को रिकॉग्नाइज करने का एक इनेट आज का लॉ है, संविधान है। और उस संविधान को अगर मैं कहूं, आज के जितने भी धर्म शास्त्र हैं उनमें से एक धर्म शास्त्र। मैं सोचता हूं कि आज के लिए इतना ही, लेकिन एक प्रार्थना मैं इस फोरम से जरूर करूंगा कि इतने सुंदर सुनने के लिए विचार मिल रहे हैं, यूट्यूब पे भी अवेलेबल रहते हैं, लेकिन मेरे जैसे 60 वर्ष से ऊपर के लिए कंप्यूटर आंख लगा के बैठना मुश्किल होता है। आप सब लोग एक सुंदर सी किताब निकालिए, खरीदूंगा और अपने मित्रों को गिफ्ट भी करूंगा। आई फील कि हम उस परम वैभव को प्राप्त करें, उस आध्यात्मिक श्रेष्ठ जीवन है।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर। मुझे पता आज आपका शेड्यूल बहुत बिजी था और आपने अपने बिजी शेड्यूल से टाइम निकाला। और अब मैं इनवाइट करूंगी रमन सर को। रमन सर। So over to you, sir.
Okay, so Mr. Ashok Mehta ji, spirituality is full of wisdom that you narrated. It connects everybody with nature, which is all embracing. Therefore, once you are spiritual, you become a part of this whole. And when we become part of this whole, we become holy. With spiritual harmony, we just don't live in the universe. We are the universe. That gives rise to a whole set of responsibility, which is the connection between law and religion. Thank you very much, sir, for elucidating on the topic of the conference. Thank you.
थैंक यू सो मच सर। और एक बात मैं बोलना चाहूंगी जो मुझे लग रहा है आपने बहुत एक जो टेक अवे इस कॉन्फ्रेंस का है, बिकॉज वी आर कॉन्स्टेंटली टॉकिंग अबाउट सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स and we have seen that since past many decades we could not achieve them. Instead of that, the ecosystem of this earth is constantly destroying and it is disturbing also. The world is completely unsettled and we can very easily see what is happening in our neighborhood in Afghanistan. तो एक जो आपने बोला ना सर कि spiritual India will lead the world, this is something which is very much important, and I think we all should recognize, firstly being Indian, we should recognize our spiritual strength. We should elevate our consciousness. And one very important aspect of Sankhya Yoga, if I am right, sir, if I am not right, please correct me. Sankhya Yoga talks about supreme consciousness, that is Purush. So if we are going to connect our consciousness with that supreme consciousness, then definitely we are going to develop a world which gives equal respect to rights of each and every living and non-living, I will say, every living and non-living being. So with this, sir, thank you so much. And what you have suggested us one book over this topic, definitely, sir, very soon you will receive a copy. And we are very much hopeful that a very good text over this topic, we are going to launch a book tomorrow. And that is a pre-release, and subsequently we will launch this book formally after some time. Thank you, Mehta sir. Thank you so much. And Iqbal sir, who is our next speaker, he has joined. So Kajal, I think there is some network problem with Ashok Mehta sir. There is low bandwidth. So Kajal, it is over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Ashok Mehta, for very eloquently underlining the Bharat's contribution to law and spirituality. And as ma'am also mentioned, that how it is the divine responsibility of Bharat to lead world out of the darkness with help of Indian thought. Now I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our next keynote speaker, Honorable Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari. Sir is presently the chairperson of Punjab State Human Rights Commission and was formerly the Chief Justice of Patna High Court. Justice Ansari is known for having highest number of reported judgments. His judgment in the prohibition of alcoholic beverages matter, where he upheld the prohibition and observed that the right to consume alcohol is not a fundamental right, have a very deep societal impact, social impact, and has led a lot of, has affected the constitutional development in this country. I would like to thank Justice Ansari for joining us today, and I would like to yield the floor to Justice Ansari for his keynote.
Thank you. I am with very awful throat. I hope I am audible and understandable by all of you.
Yes, sir.
Professor Seema Singh, the other members of the organizing committee of this very interesting and challenging subject, that is law and spirituality. As we all know, that law is a set of norms which governs the character and behavior of the people in the society. And at the same time also set the standard for any kind of punishment if the conduct or behavior is not to the basis of law. So far, the discussion that has proceeded, though unfortunately I could not hear Justice Ashok Bhushan because of the link was defective, and I could hear very little of Mr. Ashok Mehta, the senior advocate. What I understand is that spirituality is different from religion. What I was trying to think and debate in my mind is whether spirituality in different religion will be different. What is spirituality in Hinduism? Will it be different from Christianity? And what is spirituality in Christianity? Should it be different from Islam? That is where the difference between religion and spirituality comes. Spirituality means introspection. And when we introspect a religion, means we get the best of what the religion conveys. It is the quintessence, which we call in Hindi nichod. That is spirituality. And the quintessence of all the religion is one. It's not different from one to the other. And one is, first is the truth, and second, that unity of God, that there is one God, whatever name one may call it, with whatever name one may follow it. How does one apply spirituality into law? Let me give you an example. According to a law in England, when a priest commits an offense, he was to be thrown into a boiling cauldron of oil. You can imagine very gruesome punishment. And when this question came up in our court, that is in the Supreme Court after independence, in Gopalan's case, Supreme Court's referring to this decision of the English court said to the effect that when there is a law, that is the end of the matter. We have to follow the law. Long thereafter, it was in Maneka Gandhi's case that India came up with the theory that it is not enough to have a law, but the law must be just, fair, and reasonable. So if the law is not just, if the law is not fair, If the law is not reasonable, then that's not the law and cannot be sustained. So the very sustenance of such a law was put in peril by the Supreme Court. And this is precisely what spirituality in law means. That a person would be thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil is the punishment. That punishment can be given. But when you apply spirituality, then you determine, is this law just, fair, and reasonable? If you find it is just, fair, and reasonable, well, the spirituality is complied with. If it is not, then the spirituality is absent from that law. Recently, criticizing the statement of the United States President Joe Biden, when he reacted by saying that he will chase the Taliban, hunt them down. So many people said that you are taking justice into your hands, not for the purpose of doing justice, but for the purpose of imposing punishment. And that is why one has to think, is there anything in the law which allows us that instead of punishment, we will do something which will also be justice. There are some laws in the world which does provide for this. Even murder can be forgiven and punished with compensation. So it is not that there is no law nowhere. And if the entire world is one, as Mr. Mehta was some little ago was trying to make out, that in that event, deficiency of one law can be met by the efficiency of another law. In terms of quality of law or justice, India stands very high, if not the highest position. But the fact of the matter remains that nothing can be perfect in this imperfect world, and therefore there may be some imperfectness even in the law which is practiced or which had been practiced in the past in India or is practiced even now. But practicing a law which has some defect is different from applying spirituality in the law. Spirituality one can understand by an example. Say, for instance, law says, the natural law, that nobody can be condemned unheard. So if there is any law where the person is punished unheard, then that punishment is incorrect and such a law is also invalid. It does not stand the test of our constitution. And that is why today's situation is that if there is a law which does not provide for hearing, then in that event, in order to satisfy the ends of justice, you will have to read into the law the principle of natural justice. My throat has been awful and with no control. What time did you have?
15 minutes.
I hope you are fine, sir.
Otherwise, yes, fine. I hope what I am saying is making some sense.
100%, sir.
Thank you. So what I was saying is that as introspection means introspection of self or introspection of religion or introspection of any subject. And when you reach a level where you have found the solution to the problem that you had been looking for or trying to find out, and that is the stage where you have attained the spirituality. And that standard is not very easy to receive. It's very difficult. And once you receive that, then believe me, you win the whole world. I'll give you one example. When Mahatma Gandhi was facing the trial on the charge of sedition, and the judge asked him, do you plead guilty or not guilty to this charge? Gandhi said that whatever facts you have noted in the charge, these are all true. These are all correct, I don't deny. But whatever I am accused of having done, I have done for the purpose of my country and my countrymen. If the law that you are required to administer, what I have done is something which I ought not to have done and was illegal, then I have done my duty and you do your duty. History records that this judge pronounced Gandhi guilty of sedition and imposes the punishment. But what he writes in the judgment at two places is very important. He writes, it's rare in the history of mankind that a man like you is tried in a court of law. And I know that if even I will not get another person of your stature who will be tried in my court. But please bear in mind that law is not respecter of personalities. Then he pronounces Gandhi guilty. He gives punishment and then writes that tomorrow if the crown, that is the king, is pleased to pardon you, nobody will be happier than me. Meaning thereby that this judge's heart was with Gandhi. He had a duty to perform, he performed. But he also made it clear that nobody would be happier than him in case Gandhi happens to be freed. And that is precisely what happened after some time. Gandhi was released, not within standing the fact that he had been convicted of the charge of sedition. So this is the impact which has, and this is the impact which I will say we demonstrate in India. India is a country which is, if one looks at it, it has so many diversified things before it that it just keeps one wondering, where is the end? And there is really no end to the surprises that India can bring. We can go ahead and give many examples. Similarly, as far as justice is concerned, it has to be done with the means of the law that we have. But if the law is incomplete, as I was trying to point out, then we may not be able to do justice. And that is where the spirituality comes in. The spirituality will tell us where is the weakness in the law, where is the defect in the law, where is the imperfectness in the law. And if we remove that, the law will become ideal. If we continue with that, the law will obviously remain defective. I have taken a lot of your time. He has spoken far more than you were willing to hear. I will therefore conclude. But before I conclude, I must thank Professor Seema Singh, who has been always very good and nice to me, for giving me the pleasure and opportunity of coming before you and sharing in short my views and thoughts with all of you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, sir. वैसे भी आपका 10 मिनट बचा था. We wanted to hear you more, but you concluded. You have a bad throat. Raman Mittal, sir. Sir.
Thank you, Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari ji. You touched upon very important topics, whether spirituality in different religions is same or different. Now, this is a very fundamental question with which you started. And you mentioned that spirituality means introspection. And when we introspect, we get the best of religion. We get the essence, the quintessence of all religions, which is same, which you termed it as truth. We get truth and unity of one God, with whatever name we may recognize or worship. It is not enough to have law. Law has to be just, fair, and reasonable as well. And if law is not just, fair, and reasonable, it is not sustainable. There lies the importance of spirituality. It is the spirituality that tests the law on its justness, fairness, and reasonability. Thank you very much, sir, for your words of wisdom. We are beholden to you for having spared time to attend to our conference and participate in the proceedings. Thank you.
Listening you is always a great pleasure, sir. And बस मुझे दो चीजें कहनी थी. एक चीज सर, आपने एक नई चीज मतलब a new dimension which I think we all should think over it. If the law is imperfect, or if somebody is going to misunderstand the law, then in that circumstances, law automatically becomes unconstitutional. Then how it can be corrected? And then spirituality comes into the picture. But then you said another very important point, that being spiritual is not very easy thing. So I just reminded one quote of Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, and he said कि अगर आप मन, वचन और कर्म से continuously for 6 months, if you are practicing good things through your actions as well as through your thoughts, then by the time you will connect yourself with the supreme divine, and whatever you are going to say, that is going to be correct. क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ की इतिहास है कि ऋषियों ने शाप दिया और वो सही हो गया. So Swami Vivekananda is altogether talking about that thing. And the third important thing, which is very important, if two persons are performing their respective duties and there is a conflict, so how this conflict should be resolved? And yes, again, then spirituality comes into the picture, because you mentioned the beautiful is this Mahatma Gandhi and the relationship of a judge in a court case. So, sir, it was truly very insightful, and I told you that it is always it's always a pleasure to listening you, and we want to listen more and more you. So, sir, I am very thankful to you for such an insightful session. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Kajal, now we can move to next speaker, and I think Shubhala sir has joined us.
Hello, Seema ji.
नमस्कार जी, कैसे हैं आप?
Very good, very good.
Kajal.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to thank Justice Ansari. The Honorable Justice, in an articulated manner, emphasized that the very substance of law depends upon justness, fairness, and reasonableness, which is precisely what is spirituality. And I again would like to thank Mr. Ansari for taking the time out in spite of having poor health. And thank you, sir, for joining us. And now we will move on to our much awaited session, the keynote session by Mr. Shubha Vilas. I would like to introduce Mr. Shubha Vilas. Mr. Shubha Vilas is a distinguished motivational speaker of international repute and a best-selling author. The focus of his work is the application of scriptural wisdom to day-to-day life and addressing the needs of corporates and the youth through thought-provoking seminars. He has delivered more than 5,000 talks, inspiring more than 5 lakh people across 20 countries in the last 10 years. He is also a visiting faculty at several premier business management schools in India, including IIM and Narsi Monji Institute of Management Studies. We are honored and we are excited to hear Mr. Shubha Vilas. We have got really great response from a lot of young people across the country that they are very excited to hear sir on this particular topic. And we again thank you, sir, for joining us today and accepting our invitation on behalf of Campus Law Center and Ethiccraft. We welcome you, sir. I yield the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Kajal ji, for introducing me. I would like to thank Seema ma'am for making sure that I'm here. So she has been very, very kind, and it's a great honor to be on this platform talking about law and spirituality. I have always been asked a question that, in my career, while after my engineering, I finished engineering in electronics and telecommunication. And then post that I did law, and I was specializing in patent law, intellectual property law, right? I was working for a couple of years in an international law firm. And then I, joined a monastery, started staying in a temple. So people always ask me that, what did you do with your law degree and what did you do with your engineering degree, And today I'm feeling very happy to announce that, to give a talk on law and spirituality, that's like the highlight of using both the perspective of law and the spiritual understanding I have. And hopefully with this conference and with what I'm going to speak in the next half an hour, I will really be able to do justice to the topic, and I'll be able to help you all see the alignment, and I will help you all see how deeply spirituality can influence the understanding of law and our practice of law. I'll begin with a very interesting concept. For all those of y'all who are, law students, law professionals, and anyone interested in understanding law, there is a very beautiful understanding that Sanskrit gives us. There are two words in Sanskrit that are very interesting, very similar, but just one small difference. There is Shastra and then there is Shastra. Shastra means weapons and Shastra means scriptures. Very small difference between the two, but there is a big difference in when they are used. Usually, people are given laws. Like, for example, many of our scriptures across the world are law books. Technically, if you see, the Bhagavad Gita, it gives so many laws. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, even the Bible and the Quran, there is so many laws that are being given to us to help us be good human beings first. Because spirituality, without being a human being, it doesn't make any sense at all. First, you need to get to the human platform. That's why Shastra is always taught, supposed to be taught at least. There are some people who don't understand Shastra, and they are the ones who are to be helped by using Shastra. Shastra means punishment. Shastra means weapons, right? So if you don't understand it, then you need to be told the same thing in a different way. Like, there are 4 types or 4 levels of intelligence. First class intelligence is you hear something and you understand it immediately. Like, for example, you hear smoking is injurious to health. You hear it once, that's all, you don't smoke. Second class intelligence is you hear it but don't understand it. But when you observe somebody suffering, then you understand. Cigarette smoking is injurious to health, you hear, but you don't understand. But when you see someone suffering with lung cancer and all that, then you understand immediately. That is second class intelligence. Third class intelligence is you hear, you don't understand. You see someone suffering, you still don't understand. You think it will not happen to me. And then when it happens to you, then you understand. Oh, no, cigarette smoking is bad. The fourth class intelligence is you hear, you don't understand. You see someone else suffering, you don't understand. You yourself suffer, you still don't understand. Next time you think I'll smoke electronic cigarette, That's what most society is ending up into. So when you have a society that is filled up with a lot of fourth class intelligence, when I'm saying fourth class intelligence I'm not talking about educational degrees. Education and intelligence are 2 different things. They have no connection with each other. Somebody might be highly educated, but still maybe fourth class intelligence. Somebody may be no education at all, but still may have first class intelligence. So when Shastra doesn't work, when you especially have the fourth class intelligence, that's when Shastra comes in. Punishment, which helps one rectify and repent. And that's what the purpose of punishment is. That's what the purpose of justice system is. To help people, if they make a mistake, rectify and repent. The Constitution of India, interestingly, if you actually look at the book in which the original Constitution of India is written down, all the corners of the book, there are paintings from Ramayana and Mahabharata. And it's very interesting that there are paintings from Ramayana and Mahabharata because these books, these scriptures give us a lot of the framework of what good law is, what good law practices, and the understanding of justice. The Mahabharata talks about 4 very important things: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Now, these are not just principles that are to be just spoken like that, but they are to be lived by. Artha, when it is in connection with dharma, dharma means principles. Artha means wealth. So when money is in touch with dharma, when you earn money, keeping principles in mind, then that money is used in the right way. Kama, or kama means desire, and moksha means liberation. When kama is used for pursuit of liberation, that means all your desires are for liberation. Now, what is the meaning of liberation? Liberation is not just the spiritual liberation of going back to the spiritual. That's not the only liberation. It's liberation from fear. When you sleep at night, how do you sleep? Do you sleep well, or do you need sleeping pills? Or all night long you're not getting sleep because of so many anxieties, so many pressures, so many stresses, and because of many times not doing the right things. The Mahabharata says there are many reasons why you don't get sleep at night. And one of the reasons is when you have taken somebody else's property, you won't get sleep at night. That means when you have stolen from someone else, you don't get sleep at night. Anxiety leads to sleeplessness. And anxiety is a result many times of not exactly taking the right decisions in life, which leads to fear, which leads to a lot of anxiety because we don't know what is going to happen. So freedom, so liberation is liberation from many types of fears that may accrue in our hearts due to wrongdoings. So when wealth is in touch with dharma, that wealth is utilized nicely. And when karma is in touch with moksha, the desires are for the right things. But you know what the problem in this world is? The problem in this world is that people are not interested in dharma and people are not interested in moksha. They're interested in artha and kama. When artha and kama are together, it's a disaster. When wealth and desire is together, it's a disaster. Because the only desire you have is for money. And the only reason you use money is for increasing your desires or satisfying your desires. That is a deadly combination. The most amount of crime, the most amount of wrongdoings in this world are because of artha and kama being together all the time in people's lives. Ideally, artha should be in touch with dharma and kama should be in touch with moksha. That leads to a healthy society. Spirituality simply helps us reach there. Mahabharata teaches us about 4 very important principles of life. In fact, all the stories of Mahabharata, everything, the whole Mahabharata itself teaches us 4 important principles. I'm not talking about dharma, artha, kama, moksha now. I'm going deeper. I'm going into something else which we may not have thought of much. What are the 4 things that Mahabharata teaches us? First, it teaches us excellence in skills. Second, it teaches us about being loyal to adopted values. Third, it talks about internal character. And fourth, it talks about purpose. Now, the first thing, which is excellence in skills, it is very easy to see. It is very easy to experience and it's very easy to judge. One can easily judge a difference between a good speaker and an average speaker, a good tabla player and an average tabla player. So if there is comparison between 2 peoples and it is purely based on skills, especially if you have 2 people who have equal skills, it will be a very close call to decide. But otherwise, it's not a rocket science. You can easily make out who has great skills and who doesn't have great skills. The Mahabharata goes to the second point. So the Mahabharata only doesn't talk about externals or skill. A lot of times today, people are judged purely based on their externals. You have great skills. That means you're great. You're a great person. No, that's not how you conclude if a person is great or not. You go deeper. The second thing the Mahabharata teaches us about being loyal to adopted values. What is the meaning of being loyal to adopted values? Let me talk about this. This is very easy to perceive. Like say, for example, maintaining a dress code, reaching on time, not breaking line, following the traffic signals, even when the policeman is not there. These are all aspects of one's behavior that cannot be ignored. And when you look at such behavior in people, very impressive because it's visible. So skills and being loyal to adopted values, it's very visible. You can make out easily. The third thing, which is very tricky, is internal character. Internal character essentially means what a person is inside. It is not easy to gauge the internal character of a person in a small interaction. You can judge the behavior of a person or the adopted values of a person in a small interaction. You can judge the skills of a person in a small interaction probably. But to judge the internal character of a person with one interaction, very difficult. So internal character can be observed or perceived by deeper observations. Like if a person is deeply honest, if a person is sensitive to other people's needs, if a person is humble to the core. So the effect of character is experienced by society at large. You can't see it in one interaction, but when you observe a person's life, when you observe a person's contribution, you can actually perceive internal character. But the fourth thing the Mahabharata teaches you is purpose. That means this is the most difficult to ascertain. What is the purpose for which you have skills, for which you use your skills? What is the purpose for which you use your adopted values or behavior? what is the purpose of a certain character that you have, the internal character you have. When you understand the purpose of a person, that's when you get the complete picture. Somebody may be very skilled, but use the skill for the wrong purpose. Somebody may have very good behavior, but after having great behavior, he uses that great behavior to manipulate people and get things done. A person may be, having externally seeming good character in terms of the way he takes care of people, being sensitive and all that, But you can be very charitable. You can be very sensitive. You can be very caring, even humble, but for a wrong purpose. And therefore, understanding motive is very important to be able to give justice. I'm going to tell you all a very interesting story from the Mahabharata that will help you understand what I'm talking about in a much more powerful and yet in a very interesting way. In the Mahabharata, we find at one point during the war of Mahabharata, Yudhishthir is injured very badly by Karna. And Yudhishthir is like all over hurt and very, more than hurt, he's quite shocked because of the way Karna treated him. And he was very angry, very upset. And he was hoping that Arjun takes revenge on his behalf. So somehow the chariot driver of Yudhishthir takes him back to the camp and Yudhishthir is like recovering there from his wounds. And then Arjun runs in to see if his brother is fine. As soon as Arjun runs in, Yudhishthir he asks him the question. He asks him, did you kill Karna? Arjun says, no, I came to find out if you're all right. And immediately, Yudhishthir began to blast Arjun. He says, you're a useless person. I should not have had faith in you. I should have probably had faith in, other people. I should have had faith in Nakul Sahadev probably, Blasted him like anything. Why? Because Yudhishthir made an assumption that Arjun will do it and he didn't do it. And he was hurt because his expectation was not met. And then when Yudhishthir blasted Arjun, one of the things he said is, I suggest that you throw your Gandiva bow into the fire. It's a useless piece of stick. Yudhishthir says like this. And Arjun gets wild. Arjun is so angry, he runs to his brother and he's almost on the verge of killing his own brother. So Krishna stops him and he asks him, come on, what are you doing? Arjun says, I taken a vow that anybody who tells me to throw my Gandiva, I'll kill that person. Krishna says, I'll give you a better idea instead of killing Yudhishthir. He says, according to the scriptures, if a younger person insults an older person, it is as good as killing him. So he tells Arjun, why don't you just insult Yudhishthir? And Arjun starts a series of insults. He says, all our problems in life is because of you. He tells Yudhishthir. He said, if you are not attached to gambling, we would have been so happy in life. And Arjun blasts Yudhishthir like anything. And after blasting him, Arjun takes out a knife and he's going to cut his own head. And Krishna asks him, now what happened? Arjun says, after insulting my elder brother like this, how can I live? I'm feeling so bad for what I did. Krishna said, don't worry. I'll give you a simple solution to that also. He said, if you want to commit suicide, if you want to kill yourself, there is a very interesting recommendation that the scriptures give. How to kill yourself. Krishna says, self-praise is as good as suicide. He tells Arjun, praise yourself. Today, all Instagram, Facebook accounts are suicidal attempts, in a sense. Everybody is praising themselves only. So then Arjun starts praising himself like anything. He said, I'm a Gandiva Dhari, I've defeated Indra, I've defeated Shiva. Goes on and on. Finally, Yudhishthir and Arjun, both of them thank Krishna for helping them resolve their conflict. And then Krishna tells them two amazing stories. And this is what my explanation of what justice is, understanding motive is. Krishna tells Arjun and Yudhishthir, you can't look at a person's behavior and understand why he is behaving in such a way. He says, when you look at a person's behavior, sometimes we assume something and then we look at the person's behavior and then we make our own conclusions. Krishna says, unless you understand a person's motive, you cannot make conclusions, because sometimes acting rightly is actually wrong. And sometimes acting wrongly is actually right. And Krishna gives two stories. He tells the first story of a hunter who killed an animal that was blind. And in those days, in the hunting profession, killing a blind animal is considered very sinful. So the hunter was crying and he was really repenting. I made a big sin. So the sages in the forest tell the hunter, no, you've not done anything wrong. Why? Because this animal, it's actually not an animal. It's a Rakshasa who has disguised himself as an animal. So killing a demon is not wrong. So the sages help him understand that his apparent wrong action is actually right. And then Krishna tells the second story of a sage named Kaushik. He was once sitting and meditating outside his ashram, and a man came running, panting, and he was really scared. 4 dacoits were chasing him, and they were about to kill him. And somehow he escaped and came here. He went and hid inside the ashram of the sage. After some time, the dacoits came, and they asked the sage, have you seen a man here? Now, Kaushik, he had taken a lifelong vow of never speaking lies. So now he was confused. Should I tell a lie and save this man's life? Or should I tell the truth and preserve my vow of always speaking the truth? Finally, he chose to tell the truth. He told them the man is hiding here. The dacoits went and killed this man. Krishna tells this story to Arjuna Yudhishthira and tells him, sometimes when apparently you're doing the right thing, you're actually doing the wrong thing. The sage is doing the right thing. You should not lie. That's the right thing. You should always speak the truth. Absolutely right thing. But look at the result. The result was a disaster. And therefore, understanding a person's motive is so very important. And that is what spirituality is about. Spirituality is not just a set, it not just tells you about laws, but it also tells you about why those laws are created. If you just follow a set of laws without understanding the motive behind why those laws are made, and if you look at the action of a person and don't understand the motive behind that action, you will not be able to understand the person at all. And therefore, when you go deepest to the level of purpose and motive, that's when you actually understand a person much more deeper. The Ramayana has one section that is one of the most brilliant sections of the Ramayana. In fact, I'm doing a PhD on understanding leadership and governance from the Ramayana. And while I was doing my research, I found some really amazing principles that Lord Ram talks to Bharat when they meet in Chitrakoot. I'm going to tell you all some very small principles that Ram speaks about how good decisions are made by leaders. So one of the things Ram says is he's asking Bharat a series of questions. He says, I hope no one who is upright is falsely accused of an offense and killed impatiently without a proper inquiry by those who know laws well. And then Ram says, I hope a thief who is caught red-handed is interrogated well and not wrongly released due to greed for money. And then Ram says, I hope your learned ministers objectively examine a case after studying the situation carefully when there is a contention between rich and poor people. And then Ram says something amazing. Look at this. He says the tears of those who are falsely accused destroy those who are indifferent to justice. That means when someone cries, especially when the person is wrongly accused, the tears of the person destroy the person who is actually indifferent to justice. A leader always finds himself in situations where he will need to mediate conflicts or deal with wrongdoings or handle accusations. Acting justly is so important for leaders. Injustice happens at so many levels. Ram speaks about 3 reasons why leaders make wrong decisions in such cases. Imagine if this is taught in the in law books, how relevant it is. Ram speaks about 3 reasons why leaders make wrong decisions. First reason he says is impatience. Second reason he says is greed. And third reason he says is partiality. These are the three greatest enemies to good decision making when it comes to resolving conflicts and dealing with wrongdoing and handling accusations. Impatience stems from not spending enough time in understanding the situation. Every leader has to listen patiently without jumping to conclusions. Only when one has sufficiently heard patiently and sufficiently heard the problem, he can understand the problem. A leader has to ensure that he spends sufficient time listening to both sides of the story. Very often, a leader hears one side of the story and makes conclusions, and serious errors are made in decision making. The second, which is greed, the Ram speaks about. Bribing a leader to get out of serious allegations is not uncommon. So leaders can succumb to various kinds of bribes. And such leaders tend to leave the wrongdoer. And in the process, they do great injustice to the person who is affected. So when a leader does not have justice as his first priority, he ends up in making unethical decisions that tarnish the reputation of the legal system. People lose faith in the fairness of such organizations. And the result is demotivation, and the result is a decrease in the outputs. The third most common reason why leaders, why those who are justice upholders make wrong decisions is because of adherence to partiality. So when there is a contention between a person whom the leader favors and a person whom the leader hardly knows, the natural inclination of the leader is towards people that he knows closely. So this inclination damages the process of serving justice. Every leader should learn to remain detached while performing his role as a decision maker. Every individual has the right to experience fairness and a respectful treatment. When a leader favors another based on friendship, based on financial status, based on social status, based on gender bias, based on designation, or any other such criteria, the result and the decision that is made is detrimental. And therefore, Ram is warning Bharat that at any cost, if you make erroneous decisions in your life, he's saying the tears that come out from the eyes of the person who is unjustly punished or not offered the right justice, falsely accused, such a person, the tears of the person destroy the person who is making an unjust decision. Look at that. Look at the weight of the word. Decision making has to be performed with the utmost of precision and integrity. The price of a wrong decision is delivered and is very high. The price is very high both to the organization as well as the person who is taking the decision, the reputation of the person and goodwill of the person. And therefore, when leaders are expected to make good decisions in life, the expectation is very high. The balance between understanding from a spiritual perspective and understanding from a legal perspective is actually very, very, interlinked. Its law originally began with the law of Manu. The Manu Samhita is a law book, but it is not a static law book. It's a dynamic law book that changes according to culture. And therefore, when you look at law, according to the present time, place, circumstance, the application of the law may change, but the principles never change. And therefore, spirituality helps us go to the deepest roots of what the principles are. And then the application may be varying. But if the principles are taken care of, then it is much easier to understand the application of those laws. And the laws can be, suitably molded to figure out, the right decision, the right, result. Unfortunately, most lawyers today, I'm sure it happens at all levels of the judicial process. Many people who enter the field of law, they enter simply because there's a lot of money in it. Greed and justice. They don't go good. They don't go together. The idea of justice has to be married to the idea of purpose, the idea of principles, and the idea of fairness. If the principle of justice is married to some other thing, it creates a disaster. Therefore, I said dharma, which is good principles, and artha, when they're together, then greed doesn't arise. But when artha and kama are together, then greed arises, and there is a great disaster that is awaiting society. The judicial system today is crumbling under this weight, the weight of artha and kama being together. And the judicial system is crumbling under the weight of greed. And there's no end to this. And only when you understand these three principles that Ram speaks about, how important it is to be patient and listen to both sides, how important it is to control your desire for wealth, the idea of artha, acquiring too much, and doing anything for that. And the third idea of, wanting to really be impartial rather than being partial to one side. So these three together makes a powerful difference. And that's what marries the world of law and the world of spirituality. Thank you very much. I'll stop here. And I'm very, very grateful and honored to be on this platform. And I'm very, very honored to be a part of this a very, very beautiful conference. Very important topic that really needs a lot of deliberation and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shubhilaji, for this excellent exposition. And now, firstly, I will invite my professor in charge, Professor Raman Mittal, sir. Raman, sir, so over to you.
So, thank you very much, Shubhilaji. You started with the difference between Shastra and Shastra.
Thank you, Ramanji.
If you have intelligence, Shastra is enough. But if you do not exercise, you choose not to exercise your intelligence, then you invite the use of Shastra. Being able to stand in a queue is a matter of discipline. It is an indicator of civilization. In fact, the whole civilization, I think, begins with the recognition that somebody else is there apart from you. So respecting the queue is the biggest test of civilization. But internal character is higher than that. And it is not possible to gauge internal character in a small interaction. There lies the realm of spirituality. As through law, we may be able to make people stand in a line in a queue, but if we want to progress further, then we have to open the doors of spirituality. You mentioned very rightly that the tears of those wrongly convicted destroy those who are indifferent to justice. Therefore, it is extremely important for us to trace this relationship between law and religion, law and spirituality. Thank you very much, sir, for contributing to our conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shubhilaji. And I think you gave many answers, which ideally we do not even consider. Like very important point, you raised the connection between dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, which was also mentioned in our ancient scripture, especially when we talk about Chanakya's Artha Shastra. So dharma should be in combination with artha and kam with moksha, and somehow now artha and kam that have been united. And this is something which is very important. I just want to add one thing. Post-industrial revolution in 200 years, in last 200 years, the entire center of attraction has been changed. Earlier, it was wisdom with prosperity. Now it became only money centric. So within 200 years, when this earth became the most important thing, and it also became irrelevant that how we are going to collect it, how within 200 years, the entire system across the globe is facing a trouble. 68, we have destroyed environment completely, 68% flora and fauna that has already extinct. And another very relevant thing, which I think we should very seriously contemplate over it, excellence in a skill, loyal to adopted values. Yes, they obviously reflected, they are obviously reflected in the present day world also, because scientifically we are the most advanced civilization. But when we see about the application of the knowledge, they have completely destroyed 5 elements of earth, which are very essential for our own existence. So definitely the internal character and purpose is missing somewhere. So we all need to think over it, that how without acknowledging the importance of spirituality, we cannot recognize the importance of law, and we cannot acknowledge it properly the way it should be properly acknowledged. So thank you so much, Shubhalaji. Thank you so much. And now, Kajal, it's over to you.
Hare Krishna, Arunaksh, Madhav Prabhu, very happy to see you too. Thank you for making sure I'm there in this conference. Thank you very much. Very grateful to all of you all.
So much, Prabhuji, for accepting our invitation.
बहुत धन्यवाद आपका. It's always a pleasure listening to you. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
We just, as soon as you stopped with your keynote session, we received a lot of messages that wishing that you had more speaking time. And we just really, we are very thankful for joining us. And indeed, sensitivity, humbleness, honesty are the attributes that are to be incorporated in our lives, especially how you pointed out it is important for us as lawyers and future lawyers. And we all at Campus Law Center are very humbled to you addressed us today. And thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And now I would like to introduce our next keynote speaker, Ms. Vasanti Pillai, who is joining us from South Africa. Ms. Pillai is the magistrate at the Department of Justice and has been practicing, and she is a practicing attorney and conveyor in South Africa. Ma'am is a noted legal trainer for Criminal Court Practice Law Society, South Africa. We are honored and we welcome you, ma'am, to the International Conference on Law and Spirituality on behalf of Campus Law Center and Ethiccraft. We thank you for accepting our invitation, and I yield the floor to you, ma'am, for your keynote session.
My salutations, namaskar, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much to the organizers for putting this event together. And I'd like to also acknowledge the presence and my greetings to the honorable ministers, members of parliament, distinguished members of the judiciary, respected members of the academia, my learned fellow colleagues, attorneys and advocates who are present. And I think more especially my message today and my presentation is addressed to the future generation of lawyers, the aspirant lawyers, our students who are possibly attending. And I feel very humbled by the fact that, and to continue from where Shubha Vilas Prabhu just ended, it's a tough act to follow because he's absolutely brilliant. And what he has said is so profound. But at the same time, I think I've got the floor right now, as much as he didn't have, and he could have spoken much more, I'm sure. I'm hoping that my presentation can build and expand on what he has already touched on, because amazingly, the topic that I have decided to speak about as well is the crisis in the legal profession. He has made reference to the fact that there's the crumbling of the justice system. And I also share those kind of concerns, although we hadn't discussed with each other. So I was absolutely amazed that the precursor to my presentation is something that I can continue to expand on. So I think it's a wonderful flow of continuity in terms of this theme that seems to be pervading currently. And so I want to speak about the crisis in the legal profession, particularly focusing on the requirement of being a fit and proper person, which also speaks to character. So I'm just requesting if I could have the facility to share my screen, because I prepared a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see. Okay, I'm just, whilst I'm waiting for that, I will just begin to, address the point of the concept that this entire conference has, the concept note of it. And I think that's a very, relevant topic. I still don't have the screen sharing facility.
Madhav bhai and Abhinav, kindly allow ma'am to share a screen.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
well, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. So yes, so like I mentioned, my topic is going to be on the crisis in the legal profession, focusing on the requirement of the fit and proper person, which appears to be generally the kind of concept that we are looking for in many regions of the world for admission into the profession itself. So like I mentioned in the concept note itself, spirituality is the progenitor of ethics and morality, which in turn have always provided a context for determining the validity of laws. Development of legal system therefore has an imprint of spiritual processes which seeks to promote peace, harmony, and reduction of conflicts in society. So I've just highlighted certain key phrases, which I think is absolutely abundantly relevant to the situation in the legal fraternity currently. The fact that spirituality is the source of ethics and morality shows us that even our ethics and morality stems from a spiritual background. And this is what is required to make our laws and our practice a valid one. This also helps with the development of the legal system. And I think most importantly is the fact that all of this, the spirituality permeates, and everything within our area of practice is based on the imprint of the spiritual processes in our lives itself. So I'm trying to, the reality of the situation, however, in stark contrast, is that it is rather unfortunate. When we look at the reputation of the legal profession, it is being tarnished due to lawyers who fall prey to greed. Shubha Vilash Prabhu also mentioned this about the issue of greed and how people who are, the lawyers and judges who are considered to be the guardians of the legal profession and the protectors of the ideals of fairness and justice are unfortunately falling prey to greed. And this is resulting in the fabric of the future of the profession being riddled with blemishes arising from the lack of ethics, morality, and inherently spirituality. Just yesterday, Shubha Vilas Prabhu mentioned about the fact that bribes, for instance, and amazingly, I also found this last night when I was putting my PowerPoint together, this article that appeared in the media yesterday of a Durban lawyer being charged after allegedly offering a bribe to a clerk of the court. And when I looked at this article, and this is just like 24 hours old news, it reflected that the person in question was supposedly giving a 200 rands to the clerk for finding or locating or providing him with a default judgment. 200 rands in the equivalent of Indian rupees is a mere 1,000 rupees. But it is absolutely embarrassing that, as much as this matter is sub judice and it hasn't been ruled upon, but the fact that this has received media attention, the public and at large, general public, this is the kind of impression that they get without waiting for the finality of the case as to what was the reason for the exchange of the 200 rands, etc. I'm not here to pass judgment or to unpackage this, which is, like I mentioned, sub judice, but just to show how the media has so much of influence that reflects or portrays the image of the profession. And it is these kind of examples that eventually create and cast a bad light on the profession itself. Now, entering into the profession, many people, when they begin to enter into the profession, they are largely influenced by the image that is projected of lawyers. And as we can see on your screen right now, it's all these TV series or these movies that seem so alluring, so attractive. And what is the underlying allurement of this profession? It is the sassiness, it is that success that is portrayed by the designer suits, it is the amazing cars that are being driven, it is the affluence, it's all of these things that seem to attract people into the profession. But alas, my point is that all that glitters is not gold, and that there is indeed a crisis in the legal profession. And some of the points that one can look at for the reasons of entering the profession based on these series are the glamour, the affluence, the sharp-mindedness that appears to be portrayed by these actors in their roles as lawyers, how powerful they come across, and everything is assumed to be success, these kind of spin-offs from being a lawyer suddenly reflects one's degree of success. But I'd like to just pause for a moment and look back at the historical perspective of the profession. How did this profession originate? So it's important to reflect on the origins of the profession that earned itself the distinction of honor and respect. Yes, this was noted as an honorable and respectful profession. In Greece, in the early days, when we look back historically, it seems like the earliest traces, according to Western records, at least I must say, qualify that, is that the ranks of what we would currently say gave rise to current day lawyers came from those persons where the Athenian orators. And however, they faced structural obstacles because at that stage, these orators would be good in the way that they could speak. They were expert spokespersons. However, in pleading one's case, at that time, the rules were that no one could plead someone else's case. The person who was involved in a dispute, etc., would have to represent themselves. However, there was a proviso that you could have representation, but that would have to be assistance by a friend. And then we see how, because no one could plead another person's case except if you were a friend, these orators became friends of those who were parties to the dispute. In practice, of course, we know that this was a legal fiction and that it was, being a friend was these orators that were representing them. However, subsequently in Rome, Emperor Claudius abolished the rule that there was no fee to be paid to these orators, because being a friend, one could not receive any payment. But in Rome, one could see the first time that payment of fees were officially or legally being allowed. And then too, it was limited to an amount of 10,000 sesterces. So we can see, and this is something that I want to speak about as well, is the issue of fees. So two things that I'd like to discuss is the payment of fees, which we can see historically was shied away from because it was an honorable profession and we were not in it for the fees itself, but rather for the service that we were rendering for friends, almost on the concept of pro amico. Then the second one is the admission of lawyers into the recognized profession, because there was no structured profession at that time. And we see that currently to be admitted, and I'm using my certificate here in South Africa, when you get admitted as an attorney, there's a process other than just being armed with a law degree that one is required to follow. It's a long, tedious journey, which involves a lot of studying. And that is not just possessing a law degree is not the end of the road, at least in South Africa. And I'm not sure in other countries, particularly in India, where this conference is being hosted. And I'm assuming that one has to serve some sort of pupillage or period of articles of clerkship under a seasoned attorney or advocate before one is admitted, and write the bar exams as well. So all of it is a long, tedious journey. And at the end of the day, to be admitted in that profession is such a glorious event. So we don't really and ideally want to be struck off the role of attorneys or lawyers. We don't want to be suspended from practice. And those are the kind of things that my presentation will talk to. And I think if we look back as well, when we speak about the issue of fees, we look at the advocate's robe historically as well. There is this triangular pocket, and I'm not sure in India whether this still prevails, but I know in the South African robe with our advocates, this robe still has this little pocket at the end. Some speculation as to what was the purpose of this pocket. And I see, the robe itself brings together the functionality and the practicality of this dress code into the purpose that it serves for the purpose of my, addressing the issue of robes. It is said that this pocket historically was for the purposes of the client to put in the gold coins or the silver coins into the back of the robe of the person that was representing them, because it was actually embarrassing for the legal practitioner to openly take fees from their client, because it was the status of the profession, that fees was an issue that would become, minimize the the value that was being provided. Also, the fact that it was being at the back of the rope shows that it is said that it is possible that it didn't want the amount of fees that was being put into the pocket should not have the effect of the quality of the work that was the service that was going to be rendered by the advocate. And therefore it was at the back. So he would be somewhat blind in the level of work that service that he was rendering in court, and not be influenced, or rather not minimize or offer a proper service to his client because he was being paid less than what he felt he should be paid at that stage. The current, unfortunately, the current impression of attorneys and lawyers and advocates is that they are vultures preying on susceptible clients, because when disputes come about and the services of lawyers are being engaged, it's pretty much the perception that lawyers take advantage of their clients' dilemmas, their desperation at that time, and they benefit out of that particular situation. And we find that going around are many lawyer jokes and cartoons. And I know when Shubha Vilas Prabhu was just speaking as well now, he spoke about, he gave an example about whether one should lie or not lie, and that story that he related. And there's one joke that comes to mind based on what he just said, is what is the difference between a lawyer and a liar? And he said, it's just the spelling that's the difference, but both their lips are moving. And it's really unfortunate that we bear the brunt of these kind of jokes. Here on the screen at the moment, you should be seeing the situation where in a dispute, two parties, as depicted in this particular cartoon, two farmers on either end of the cow. And please forgive me, because the cow I know is considered holy, and I hope you don't find it objectionable, but this is something that is, on the internet. And this is reflecting the image of the profession itself, where two persons in dispute, the farmers are tugging on either end, claiming ownership of the cow. And in between is the lawyer who's literally milking that cow. And it's reflective of him benefiting out of this situation by milking them for fees. More jokes, that we find that are very prevalent, and once again reflecting the nature of the fact that lawyers are seen to be heartless. They don't really care for their clients. The other one is that it's all money making as well. Now, Shubha Vilas Prabhu has also spoken about greed, and this is something that I want to touch on as well. In Bhagavad Gita, we find, that Lord Krishna speaks of this verse, and Srila Prabhupada in his purport, and I'm referring to the Bhagavad Gita as it is, whose purport is provided by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. He writes and he says there are three gateways leading to hell: lust, greed, and anger. Every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. And if I could just read from the purport that Srila Prabhupada wrote, he says the beginning of demoniac life is described herein. One tries to satisfy his lust, and when he cannot, anger and greed arise. A sane man who does not want to glide down to the species of demoniac life must try to give up these three enemies, which can kill the self to such an extent that there will be no possibility of liberation from material entanglement. Because ultimately, this is what we are doing. We are entangling ourselves by this greed that seems to engulf us during the process of our practice, when we see the vulnerability of clients, etc., and their desperation. Unfortunately, the tendency to exploit. And please, I'm not intending, it's not my intention to cast all lawyers with the same brush, but unfortunately, there are a fair amount of persons that have brought about this kind of perception of the profession that warrants a reference to these issues in a presentation such as this. The second point I want to move on is the law as a profession. So this author, Larson, in the journal article that was written, The Rise of Professionalism, a Sociological Analysis, back in 1997, explains that in the early days, the profession intended to include only the learned occupations of divinity, law, and medicine. So the term profession was only used in reference to these what were perceived to be learned occupations. And as ma'am just mentioned, Seema ji mentioned, she spoke about post the Industrial Revolution. Interestingly, prior to the Industrial Revolution, class and status determined entry into these professions. In ancient India, and also reflected in Shubha Vilas's presentation as well, in the time of the Raja Rishis, one could see that the learned persons in society back then and the advisors of the king were the Brahmanas. And they were meant to guide and advise for the upholding of dharma or righteousness, which at that stage formed the legal system and the justice system itself. Over time, rules for admission into the profession were developed. Let's turn to look at what is meant by profession. How did the word profession originate? It is said that it originates from the Latin word professio, which means a public statement or a promise. And a promise, of course, means that persons in this profession are promising to uphold certain principles, certain virtues, and therefore they must be worthy of public trust. They have to carry out their professional duties with public spiritedness and the highest standards of ethical conduct. In Bhagavad Gita, and Shubha Vilas spoke about leadership as well, and this is very relevant and important for us to take away is this verse from Bhagavad Gita, where it is said that whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standard he sets by his exemplary act, all the world pursues. So when we look at this, the exemplary acts, the one expects to be followed, it is us who are in the position to influence our clients. It is us who have the position that others in society look up to. So we need to set those ideal examples. And in the purport to this verse as well, Srila Prabhupada mentions certain categories of leaders. And he mentions the kings, the parent, the teachers, as being considered to be in positions of leadership. And I would just like to say that likewise, because we teach, those of us who are in academia, those of us who are representing clients, to a large degree, we are actually influencing the future generations by the examples that we set as well. So the expectations of professionals, what is society looking to us as professionals for? The commitment to promoting the basic good in society, that is justice. We have to abide by a code of ethics. Professional conduct is regulated and enforced by a controlling body of the profession. So here in South Africa, we have what is called the Legal Practice Council. And before one gets admitted as a lawyer or as an attorney, or we now call ourselves legal practitioners, because it's now become a fused profession where there's no differentiation between advocates and attorneys. So it's the legal practitioner. So we are governed by the Legal Practice Council. And the Legal Practice Council, in their wisdom and over time, codes of conduct have evolved. So it's not just sufficient to be in possession and armed with an LLB degree to be admitted as an attorney. This Legal Practice Council has become the gatekeepers to the profession. And one of the requirements when you apply for admission to in court to be admitted as an attorney or an advocate is that you need to be a fit and proper person. And to that end, you need to submit a certificate by 2 other persons in the profession who can vouch for your good character or character reference. So what is the need for this fit and proper person requirement? It is, of course, to assure the unsuspecting public that when you are admitted and you have been officially accepted into the profession, that you are trustworthy to take on their case, because these persons are literally entrusting their lives, their most valuable assets when you're drafting their contracts, when you are representing them in criminal matters, and where their liberty is at stake, and their own records, whether they are going to be saddled with a criminal record after you represent them or not. Their reputation is at stake. because there's the attorney-client privilege in which they need to feel comfortable to be able to trust and reveal everything to you so that you are properly able to represent them. So I know I'm limited for time. I'm not going to go through everything that I have originally put into my PowerPoint. Safe to say that there's no definition in any of the acts that I've come across, particularly in South Africa, as to who is a fit and proper person. So we have to rely on common law and case law. And both of these kind of reflect, as Subhabilash also pointed out, it's based on time, place, and circumstance. We see the political ethos at the time of these cases permeate into these decisions, these court judgments. And I'd just like to point out, like, for instance, Mahatma Gandhi, who's the father of the nation in India, he spent some time here in South Africa, and he applied to the court here, to the Supreme Court, to be admitted as a lawyer. But his application was opposed by the then Law Society of Natal, based on the fact that he was not a fit and proper person. And why was he not a fit and proper person? Because he was of Indian origin. So we look at how the apartheid mindset at that time as well discriminated and filtered into what was the concept of the fit and proper person. Our very own Nelson Mandela, who also became the father of our nation and was a practicing attorney at the time when he was arrested, was struck off the roll because of his political conscience at that stage. So the reality is that effective lawyering takes a lot of hard work. For those of you who are entering into the profession based on those images projected and on television, in the movies, etc., I'm not trying to be the to discourage you. I'm not saying that it is wrong to be financially well off, but that should not be the goal. It will come with perseverance, it will come with trustworthiness, but it should not be the reason for the entrance into the profession, nor should greed prevail, which results in the exploitation of clients. And I think one needs to earn the respect of clients and colleagues. And when you have built this good reputation, work will automatically come to you. And in that way, you'll be financially secure. So law is a calling to serve society, not a get-rich-quick business scheme. So when we enter, we are admitted as attorneys because we have fulfilled the requirement of being fit and proper persons. But subsequently, attorneys are being struck off because they are no longer fit and proper persons. So that same criteria for admission is used in the striking off. In the negative, it's phrased in the negative, that the person is not a fit and proper person. But how does someone who was initially fit and proper then falter and is being suspended from practice or is being removed from struck off from the role? And some of the reasons are as such, that we practice in an adversarial system, there's competition in the practice, in the profession, we are money driven, the education aspect as well, whether the universities are equipping us sufficiently, whether the degree itself is sufficient to make us fit and proper persons. I know that I am pressed for time, so I'm just going to very quickly scroll through these points regarding the adversarial system and then speak about it, that when we represent a client, we are actually focusing on their interests and not on the general good, not promoting the general good and looking at the outcome that will benefit both parties, which is something that appears during mediation processes, for instance. And we are focused, and it is a win-lose situation as opposed to a win situation. And we are presenting our clients' cases in the best possible light, with an indifference often for the moral merits of the case itself. And then when we look at criminal cases, for instance, and I want to just very quickly point out, for instance, like when we deal with sentencing in criminal matters, assuming your client was found guilty or opted to plead guilty, when it comes to the point of, dealing with sentencing, the onus is on the state to prove criminal convictions. And you may very well sit back and say, in the absence of the prosecutor proving previous convictions, there is no onus on you, and therefore your client should be treated as a first-time offender. So I'm not going to go into much more of this, just got to scroll through these slides. There are many people entering the profession, but it is a struggle to source work currently. So those entering the profession tend to become money driven, and they look for quick fix solutions, and they litigate without merit, dragging out these processes, thereby earning a bad name for the profession as well. And we become reduced to ordinary business people. So like I said, formal education does not necessarily prepare us for the moral challenges that may be faced. So which brings us to the question of morality, professional ethics, and the ultimate aim of legal training should be to enable a student to become a successful lawyer. So what is success? Success shouldn't be measured by how wealthy one is, but rather based on one's spirituality, I would say. This is a quotation from Chaitanya Charan Das, who wrote an article for ISKCON News. And I think it is very important that we know that spirituality is meant to help us develop love for God. This is done through a harmonious combination of philosophy and religion, which constitute the two rails on which spirituality runs. The philosophy aspect of spirituality involves the study and understanding of matter, spirit, and the controller of both God. And religion aspect involves the following of certain rules and regulations that help us realize and experience higher spiritual truths. So we need to integrate spiritual and our professional lives. This notion is not a new or radical concept, the integration of spiritual and professional lives. This brings about self-introspection and self-satisfaction. And that is ideally what we need to attain in our profession, to be able to go to bed at night feeling that sense of self-fulfillment. Ethics as a code of conduct is drafted, like I said, by the Legal Practice Council. It is enforced by that governing body. But your spiritual beliefs are personal choices, and therefore they will be more effective because they guide you in your practice, in the service that you render to your clients, in the type of practitioner you choose to be, and the type of service and the quality of service you render would be largely reflective of your spiritual practices. And I say your fit and proper term is like that I do when you enter into a marriage. When you say I do, at that stage, you are in the eyes of each other, that perfect person that you want to form this marriage, till death do us part. But during the course of the marriage, there will be challenges, and we need to adapt. We need to build on our spirituality. We need to dig deeper within ourselves and go into those crevices within ourselves, which form the fabric of our being, and overcome those challenges through that spirituality. And in that way, we can survive this profession and take that to the next level. So in conclusion, I'd just like to make some suggestions of how to end this crisis in the legal profession, this reputation, this poor reputation that has been created. We need to have a shift of mindset. When we shift our mindsets, that's when society and our clients will view us in a better light. And that would take place by the encouragement and promotion of spiritual practices, from a professional perspective, as well as from the institutional perspective of universities, where these future generations of lawyers are going to pass through those gates. We need to start beginning to instill it at that stage. And even throughout one's childhood. Mentoring is another important aspect where those of us who are in profession, and particularly those of us with years of experience, need to add value to these students' lives by leading by example, by mentoring these students. And in this way, we can effectively guarantee the future of the legal profession being restored to its original status of being a noble and honorable profession. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And it was indeed very relevant for the upcoming lawyers, for the young generation. And obviously, there is so many things to discuss. But before that, I would like to invite Raman Mittal, sir. Raman, sir, are you there?
Yeah, I'm very much there. Thank you very much, Vasante Pillai ji, for your lecture, you had very imaginatively chosen the title of your presentation, that is The Crisis of Legal Profession. We are all too often swayed by the glamour and glitter of the legal profession, but we must go to the origin of the profession. And we feel that a spiritual renaissance is a necessary precondition for a happy restoration, as the integral yoga of law and spirituality will generate justice and will only generate justice which is sustainable. You talked about the black costume curtain, which hides the physical contours of the persona of a lawyer, but it needlessly hides his mental contours as well. It is only the infusion of spiritual values in the nitty-gritty of the legal profession that the profession can truly become noble. These were the highlights, some of the highlights which are very important that we could gather from your lecture. Thank you so much.
And yesterday, Mr. Venkat Ramani sir, madam, I don't know yesterday you attended our session or not, but he was raising the same issue when he was talking about the drawbacks of adversarial system. And he raised a very valid point that it is time to rethink that whether how much and up to what extent we should continue with the system. Because very recently, Justice Mehta, who has got retired, he said one thing, and that is something which is very relevant. He said both the parties knows that what is truth, except the judge. So it is all about convincing the judge about the truth. So not necessarily the party who is going to win. That is correct in their aspect. So it is more judgment delivery system instead of being justice delivery system. So we need to work a lot over this, that how we can provide justice actually to the affected or the to the affected party. With this, ma'am, on the behalf of Ethiccraft Club and CLC, I extend my thanks to you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for joining us from South Africa. We are very grateful to you. And
thank you very much. And I'm happy to see the next speaker who is also trained in mediation and is an ombuds, and I'm sure he'll take forward this theme, as you've just mentioned about moving from the adversarial system. So thank you very much for having me, and I'm very grateful to the organizers, and I look forward to, I think it's critically important that we have events of this nature, and hopefully in future, in person, we'll be able to, associate with each other personally and also with the attendees as well. So thank you once again. Hare Krishna and Namaskar.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Over to you, Kajal.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Vasanti Pillai, ma'am, for pointing out how important it is for young lawyers to crawl out of the material entanglement which has led to the crisis in the legal profession. I'm sure that all the students attending from Campus Law Center and other students from across India have learned from your presentation. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker for the next keynote session, Mr. Brian Bloch, Ombudsman for the United States Department of Interior, Washington, D.C. Mr. Bloch formerly served as the consultant for the Mediation and Conciliation Project of the Supreme Court of India for 10 years. The project aimed at providing training to judges and senior advocates across India. Mr. Bloch works as mediator for the Multi-Door Dispute Resolution Division of the Superior Court of Washington, D.C. We are honored, and it is our privilege to have Mr. Bloch joining us today from USA. We thank you, sir, for taking your time out and addressing us this conference. I yield the floor to you, sir.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, good morning. It's 3 in the morning here in Washington, D.C. I don't think I've ever put a tie on at 3 in the morning in my entire life. So I'm very happy to be with you all today. And I thought I'd just begin. So yeah, I'm a mediator and conflict resolver, part of ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. And as most of you know, so a mediator is not a judge. It's different than private arbitration, what to speak of litigation in the courtroom. But it has ancient origins. In Sanskrit and in Bengali, it's madhyamasta, or is the word for mediator in some ancient texts. And I personally, I lived in India for 21 years, and as in the introduction, traveled to pretty much every high court in the country, working with a team was making presentations to judges and lawyers, introducing, at that time, 10 years ago, introducing mediation as court annex mediation in the system in India. And I've done hundreds, maybe even thousands of over 1,000 mediations over the years, and also personally have been a student of the Bhagavad Gita, have read that for over 40 years. And I find it really interesting that this the Gita takes place on a battlefield, and yet at the same time, the words Shanti and Ahimsa, they appear many, many times throughout the text. And that's a very interesting situation. So as I was preparing for this, I was thinking of what inspirations do I get from the Gita in my work as a conflict resolver, as a peace builder. And I thought I'd make a little presentation about that. And so I will go in and out of sharing my screen, because I'll just show this. Yeah, here we go. So lessons in ADR from the Bhagavad Gita. And I have 8 of them, and I'll check my timing so I don't go over time. So the first one is an interesting one, that how is this inspirational, acknowledging that the world is a place of suffering? Because in the Gita, several places Krishna says dukhalayam. He uses the word, like alaya means the place, and dukkha, we all know what that means, the place of suffering. Or he says anityam asukam loka, that asukam, sukha means happiness, asukha means lack of happiness. So how does that inspire a peace builder or a mediator or someone who's trying to help two parties deal with whatever conflict they're having? Well, I don't find it discouraging. I find it kind of like a reality check that not to maintain unreasonable hopes. There are times in a mediation where at the end people literally, hug each other and they can't believe that, how different they are now than the 3 hours before the mediation began. And I've had instances of that, over the years. One time in Patna, I was doing a mediation that, at least I'm told, went back to 1950. And the grandchildren were fighting the grandparents' conflict. And it did work miraculously. I had they didn't, my Hindi, Tora. So I also had someone who was helping me sometimes in the translation work. These people didn't speak English so well, and they did embrace each other after this was after 60 years of conflict. But generally, the idea is, I just feel that even if I can reduce people's miseries a little bit, then I've been successful. Even if they work out their conflict about partition or some financial dealings, I've helped a little bit. They may not love each other afterwards, because acknowledging that dukhalaya, it's a tough place to live this world. But still, it's very inspiring for me when I'm able to at least help people somewhat. And I find even if there's not a settlement in a mediation, usually by the conversation, by talking to each other, by learning a little bit more about one another, by maybe developing at least a little, if not a lot, of empathy for one another, there's some progress that has been made. So that's the first one. And the second one is about the 3 gunas in the Gita, in the 14th chapter, 17th chapter, and the 18th chapter. Krishna describes these gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And he says that, everything in this world is influenced by these three gunas. And sometimes, of course, there's combinations, just like in you take the 3 primary colors and you combine them, and there's different shades and different colors that come out. But still, having this basic idea of sattva, rajas, and tamas, or goodness, passion, and ignorance, I found to be really helpful in my work in a mediation. because Krishna says that these affect pretty much everything about us, the way we eat, the kind of food that we choose, the way we work in relationships, our behavior in different circumstances. And so I find for myself as a mediator, as a peace builder, that a mediator in the mode of goodness, which is what I try to do, is really truly neutral, or sometimes we use the word equally partial to all parties, is I try to be patient, calm, fair, sometimes even comforting, determined, and a little detached. These are qualities of sattva guna, of goodness. And I find it so helpful in a mediation if I'm influenced by that sattva. But a mediator in passion, in rajas, is often pushing for their own solutions, because as a mediator, we help the parties come to their own conclusions. But sometimes when we're influenced by rajas, we're like, I know what the answer is to this problem, and I kind of push for it. That's kind of more of our Rajasic kind of consciousness. And I also think that I'm very concerned about the outcome. I want people to to say, okay, Brian solved another problem. And there's a nice saying that I like about mediation, and that is that you have a choice. You can either be a good mediator, or you can take credit for being a good mediator, but you can't do both. So in this, as being a good mediator, one really has to try to leave their ego at the door and really focus on, it's kind of on seva, that here I am, these two parties are in conflict, and I'm trying to serve them by helping them overcome that conflict. And people pick up on that. That again, that's a very sattvic thing, but in Rajas, we are really like, almost like so attached. Oh no, you got to work this out. And there's a lot of anxiety, even in the mind and the heart of the mediator, thinking that his or her ego is on the line, whether the parties settle or not. And of course, also in the mode of passion, the mediator may favor one side or the other. I remember quite some time ago, I was, I'll just spotlight myself for a few minutes here. I was doing a training at the, I don't know if some of you may be familiar with the KC Law College in Churchgate in Mumbai. So I was doing a presentation. At one point, I asked for 3 volunteers to do a mock mediation. So there was a gentleman who played the role of the mediator, a young woman, and another man. And the young woman, I would assume, especially in the eyes of the mediator, was quite attractive. So the whole time he was doing the mediation, he was only looking at her. He pretty much ignored the other gentleman who was doing the role play. And it just said, okay, that's Rajas. That's the mode of passion, that we favor one over the other. And a mediator influenced by the mode of ignorance will often be discourteous, easily frustrated, distracted, maybe looking at their phone all the time. You see, it is 3:17 in the morning here in Washington, D.C., and not very effective. And often when the mediator is very rajasic or tamasic, they're not very well trusted by the parties, and then that, of course, makes having a good outcome that much harder to do. So the third one is practicing patience. Krishna talks about this in the Gita in the 18th chapter. Interestingly, he goes through the whole Bhagavad Gita, like 690 verses by that time. And then he says to Arjuna, he said, is everything okay? Do I need to repeat myself? Do you understand? And then, of course, Arjuna says, Nashta moham. No, my illusion is gone. But Krishna was literally ready to start the whole Gita again, if he needed to
if Arjuna needed that to understand it. So I really get a lot of inspiration from that, because sometimes, I'm sure as lawyers also you have this experience that sometimes things are just dragging on, or in a mediation, one party is just talking and talking and talking, or they don't seem to have moved an inch. They're still really in conflict with each other. And I just have to take some deep breaths, practice some mindfulness, maybe, do quietly some pranayama. I mean, I'm not going to, do a whole pranayama thing in front of them, but just cool down and be patient. And I find it's amazing that sometimes when I do that, and the parties kind of pick up on that, and they also calm down, and the patience really pays off. So being patient is quite a virtue in so many things in life, and I find in my profession it's essential sometimes, because things just don't always go the way we want them to go, at least at first. And also what's really interesting is at the beginning of mediation, sometimes the ones that I think are going to solve real easily drag on for days or at least hours. And sometimes the things that I think are going to be real difficult, parties settle in a matter of a very short period of time. So it's really a practice in patience to be a good mediator, to be a good at resolving conflicts. Okay, I think we're doing fine in terms of time, actually. Treating people equally. So in the 5th chapter of the Gita, there's 2 shlokas that are really powerful. The first one says that one is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and distress. So a real spiritual person sees that the soul is inside of everyone. And then a very famous verse that falls after that, and let me see if I remember the Sanskrit, Vidya Vinaya Sampane, Brahmane Gavihastini, Suni Chaiva Sopakecha. And then the last line is very important. Pandita, a learned person, Sama, equal, Darshina, sees everyone equally. Whether they're a learned person or they can't read or write, whether they're wealthy or poor, whether they're well-behaved or a little rough, the spiritualist in the Gita and the mediator or the judge in a court has to see with this, or at least practice this samadarshina, this seeing people equally. And it's a sadhana, it's a practice. It doesn't come automatically. There's times when, like I said, one person's being very rough and rude and the other person's being very polite. And so there would be some tendency to, well, this person's, the kind of person that, really deserves a proper settlement. And this person, well, who cares? But it's a great practice to catch myself and say, no, in my mind, say, no, samadarshana, I have to treat everyone equally. And that's so important, from an ethical point of view, especially as a court annex mediator, let's say in the Indian context, or just to get good settlements. If one of the parties picks up that you're favoring the other party, there's a good chance they want to just check out. They'll either mentally they'll check out, or they'll literally say, let's carry on with the court case. Because at least in the I haven't worked so closely. I've kept in touch with my friendships in the court system in India, but I haven't been dealing directly with it so much in recent years. But at least in the past, one of the trainings that we were doing was giving judges some training in what would be appropriate cases to refer to a court annex mediation. For example, the Delhi High Court has a very well-established mediation program there. And Tamil Nadu also, in my time, Bangalore also in my time was very much like that. And the idea, of course, is if mediation didn't settle, then they would be back in court. So
this idea of treating everyone equally is so important. Is so important for a mediator or for a person who's trying to follow the teachings of the Gita. And what's really cool is, in this case, you can do both. You can try to, you can, that it's helpful. Following the Gita also helps one be a really good mediator. Okay, so let's continue. So, and this is kind of connected. Number 5 is connected to number 4. Seeing the good in all others. Krishna says that all living entities are part of him, are his, and are the soul, not the body. And so that means that ultimately, although we may not be showing, manifesting it at the present moment, ultimately when, let's use the Gita technology, when tamas and rajas are diminished, or let's say, hopefully even disappear, and sattva is established, and even beyond that, bhakti towards Krishna is established, the good, the true nature of the person emerges. And that everyone has that true nature. Right now it's covered by rajas and tamas. And so keeping that in mind, I've found as a mediator is really inspiring to try, and also to, you know, there's this idea in my wife was a ICSE, that's right, yeah, ICSE teacher, school principal in Uttar Pradesh for many years when we were living in India. And this idea for teacher, and when she trains young teachers, she would often talk about this idea of like the self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, you treat the child as if they're going to be well behaved, as if they're going to learn the lesson, and lo and behold, they often do. And so I find when I treat the parties in a mediation as if they're good people, they have God in their heart, they are and I treat them with respect, they often, you know, kind of live up to that in the mediation process. So this presentation that Krishna makes in the Gita of having respect for every living entity, and showing that, you know, in a real sense, it's so helpful in helping parties reach a settlement in their case. So the next one, this is from the 12th chapter of the Gita. And in that chapter, I think it's verse 8 to 11, but don't quote me on that. Krishna talks about a progression. He says, okay, just love me, just be a pure devotee, and that's the goal of this whole book. So just do that. But if you can't do that, that's all right. If you can't do that, then do sadhana, do some practices that will lead you to that goal. And if you can't do that, then be a good person, give charity, be honest. And if you can't do that, so there's like these 4 steps of progression. And I really love that in terms of just practical life, that you can't always immediately reach the, you know, the highest goal that you're trying to set for yourself. But, you know, there's if you're making some progress, if there's steps towards that, that is in one sense the goal. You know, life is it's not just the reaching the conclusion, it's how you get there. It's the journey. So in a mediation, sure, I would love if they settled all the matters in a real amicable way, and at the end they, you know, offer namaskars, and they maybe if they're in a situation where they're going to have ongoing relations with each other, for example, in a partition where the 2 brothers are fighting, or something like that. That's great if they, you know, either figuratively or literally embrace one another. but that's not always what happens. And so if I think that that's the only success of a mediation, I'm not going to be a very happy mediator. So, okay, they can't do that. Maybe they can settle all their issues, even if they don't get along with each other that well. If they can't do that, maybe they can settle some of their issues. If they can't do that, maybe they can settle one of the things that brought them to the mediation. And that's quite an inspiration for the peace builder, that you can't always get a 10 every time, but a 5 may be just great. And I think that's a good lesson in life as well. We strive for our highest sense of who we are, but even if we're in the process of getting there, that can be quite satisfying. So we go on to number 7, and this is depending on God, depending on Krishna, or however we understand, God to be in our faith. This is from the 18th chapter of the Gita, where Krishna says that in all activities, he tells Arjuna, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In this way, be fully conscious of me. So for me, as you can see, I'm a person who I'm a person of faith. And there are times in a mediation where I just think, God, you got to help me here, because I have no idea what I'm doing, and this is going nowhere. And I just find that is so helpful. Obviously, I don't say it out loud, and I, it's between me and God, because the people I may be mediating with, they may be atheists. They may not care about that I'm in that mindset. So I'm not making an external show of that. But there are just many times when I can see that it's beyond my expertise, my capabilities. Just like, Draupadi, she tried to, stop the Kauravas from taking away her sari. And only when she kind of, raised both hands and said, hey, Govinda, did, the limitless sari appear. So in my mind, I'm thinking, this is really going nowhere. God, please help me. And I find that whether the mediation is successful or not, it really uplifts my spirits, and also often makes me much more effective in my work as a mediator, because it lowers my anxiety level that I have to figure everything out and I have to do all of this. And it lifts me up to a different level of consciousness where I'm doing my best. It's like in the 8th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhyacha. He says, mamanusmara, remember me and do your duty. So it's not that I'm not doing my duty. I'm not, all the things that go in the mind of a mediator as it's going on, and the training that I've had as a mediator, but also in my mind, I'm thinking, help. And I find that's really it's great. and it really helps the mediation as well. And finally, this last one is not something that I would use in a court annexed mediation, in a high court. But I often do mediations also in faith-based organizations. And in that case, and I've worked with churches here in America. I've worked in synagogues, Jewish temples, Hindu temples. I've worked with people practicing Islam, or specifically I worked with some Sufi organizations. And in those situations, I call it seeking a theocentric peace. And that is a God-centered peace. And in the last verse of the 5th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suridam sarva bhutanam gyatvam shantim richati. So this is the peace formula, the 29th verse of the 5th chapter. This is where Krishna gives 3 aspects of developing real peace within yourself. Bhoktaram Yagatapasam, that our activities should be for God's pleasure. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, that everything belongs to him ultimately. We come to the world with nothing, we leave the world with nothing. And then my favorite part, Suridam, that God is our Surit, he's our friend. And the friend of all living entities. And one who understands those three things, Shanti. So if I'm with people, if it's a faith-based mediation, because people in faith-based organizations also have conflicts, no doubt. I sometimes say, whatever faith it is, would you like to say a prayer in the beginning? Would you mind if I say a prayer in the beginning? And I find that sets a certain kind of tone. You can't be too angry with the other person when you're both praying to the same God, like that. So obviously, again, we wouldn't. This wouldn't be appropriate in a courtroom or a court annex mediation, but in a faith-based mediation, it can be quite powerful. So those are 8 inspirations that I get from my study in the Gita that I have applied in my work in India, and even I apply in a very non-religious context here in working for the United States government and working for the superior courts as a mediator. And I hope they were helpful for you and maybe give you some inspiration. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brian Bloch. And yes, mediation is now I will say, though it is a very ancient Indian practice, but now again it is keeping pace, it is picking up. And I think in the coming decades or in the coming years, it is going to be one of the most important aspects of dispute settlement. Raman sir, it is over to you.
Okay, so Mr. Brian Bloch, thank you very much for your lecture. By not being adversarial, there is some empathy between the parties that is born out of the non-adversarial process of mediation, certainly. Being patient is a virtue, and it is essential in legal practice, whether as a lawyer, working in the courts, or in the field of mediation. Being patient is also a virtue in the practice of religion and spirituality. So thank you for drawing the parallels. We thank you very much for having come over on the digital platform to participate in our conference. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And Mr. Brian Bloch, I'm just because you discuss the importance of the patience. So one story that is which is from Mahabharata and that is constantly striking in my mind, because once we talk about the mediators, Lord Krishna, in a way, he was the first mediator, though
yes,
it was failed. But once we talk about the patience, how much the patience is important. I was just imagining, that war of Kurukshetra, war zone of Kurukshetra, where both the armies, they are standing opposite to each other, and the center of the war is the strength of Arjuna. He is the key warrior, and suddenly he says before Krishna that no, I'm not going to fight. So you see, the entire war is going to take place on the shoulder of one person who is very important, and suddenly he says that I'm not going to fight. But once we read this Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita, you see the way the facial expression of Lord Krishna has been explained. He is not angry, he is smiling, and it is called as prahasan. So that is the height of his patience, and he then preaches him and teaches him the value of which comes out in the form of Bhagavad Gita. And you also tell him that actually I'm a god. But then at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, in last sloka, in last chapter, he says, whatever I had to say, I said. Now whatever you have to do, you do. So that is the height of the patience. And I think in the mediation, both the parties not only must have confidence in the mediator, but the patience should be a very important part of the mediator. Thank you so much, Mr. Brian Bloch, for such an enlightening and insightful lecture. And on the behalf of Ethiccraft Club and Campus Law Center, I extend
it to you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Kajal, I think Sai Deepak ji has joined. So let's move to our next speaker.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Mr. Bloch, for illustrating how the role of a mediator is that of a peace builder. And it is like sadhana, which needs to be practiced and developed over time. And now finally, we come to our most awaited session, which is we have been getting a lot of text from everybody that when is Mr. Sai Deepak is going to join, and students have been waiting for a long time to listen to sir on this very particular topic. And I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Sai Deepak. Mr. Sai Deepak is a practicing arguing counsel at the Supreme Court of India and High Court of Delhi. His areas of expertise include civil commercial litigation, IPR, competition law, and constitutional law. Mr. Sai Deepak is also a renowned author. His book, India That is Bharat, Coloniality, Civilization, Constitution is definitely a national bestseller. And we students of Campus Law Center had an opportunity to discuss about his book recently. And we thank Mr. Sai Deepak for addressing this conference on behalf of Campus Law Center and Ethiccraft Club. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us and for accepting our invitation. I yield the floor to you, sir.
Thank you, Kajal. Thank you, Ramanji and Seemaji, for giving me the opportunity to share space with such august speakers from whom I have a lot to learn. And I have been keen to listen to other sessions. Unfortunately, I've just been occupied with a few things. So I promise that once my session's over, I'm going to go through the recordings to hear everyone. And at the very least, make time each day to listen to one person at least. Because I think the theme of this particular conference, I think, is extremely relevant, and I can't begin to actually explain the significance of it and its ramifications, because I think this goes to perhaps the very roots of several issues that you're faced with today. Conflict resolution and dispute resolution between two private parties being one of them at least, but beyond that, I think you're looking at what constitutes the fount of law itself. So typically jurisprudence is seen as the fount of law, but I would go a step further to basically say that it's spirituality and ontology that serves as the fount of law. And unless and until we understand the ontological foundations of a certain principle, there's always the chance that there is a certain cultural mismatch between a principle that is sought to be applied in a different jurisdiction. So that's one of the reasons that I chose to address on this particular topic, which is the ontological foundations of law. I hope I don't come across as being self-edificatory, but this is one of the themes that I try and address as part of the book for the simple reason that the entire premise of my position is that all knowledge of a particular culture must be traced necessarily to its unique ontological experience as a culture. Which is to say that fundamentally what you see as the nature of a sentient being, which is to say a being which has a soul and which has the ability to think. And the questions that you ask of yourself as the purpose of the existence of a soul, or let's say perhaps the Indic word has to be Atma, and Atma and soul don't necessarily serve as translations of each other. But for the lack of a better word and English's ability to, or let's say inability to accommodate Atma, I might as well use soul only as a crude approximation of it. So the conception of every culture of its own ontology and the metaphysical nature of a human being has fundamentally served as the fount of all its knowledge. And if, in fact, most people assume that perhaps metaphysics perhaps has a role only in the realm of social sciences. But the fact is it equally plays a role in the realm of physical sciences as well, and what you see as mathematics. Are universal, and it's the conception that subjects such as mathematics are universal, perhaps may change in the future as people read more about this particular branch called ethnomathematics. And this is an evolving field where there is increasing literature telling us how each culture's conception of mathematics has perhaps been heavily influenced by its own experience and its own understanding of ontology. This is a subject that I've just started reading for the simple reason that I wanted to understand whether subjectivity, or let's say the unique perspective of each culture, has a bearing purely in the realm of philosophy, but does it also have a bearing in the realm of physics? And that is, or let's say in the realm of natural sciences and physical sciences. Turns out that in the future, we may start seeing discussions on these lines as well. Simply because when someone says that Bharat's contribution to the realm of science, or its biggest contribution is perhaps the invention of the concept of zero, then it goes back to our own thinking of what is shunya and where does it come from, what kind of philosophy or darshana it draws its inspirations from. So if you look at how science has evolved, so to speak, in Europe as well, while today we see religion and science in two different silos, spirituality and a spiritual, let's say, consciousness that is associated with a particular religion has played a significant role in furthering philosophical thought, and from there mathematical thought, and from there it goes to physics. So this particular nexus is something that unfortunately the current discourse doesn't accommodate, simply because we have very cut and dried notions of science, we have very cut and dried notions of the interplay between religion and science, and we have very obscure views, or perhaps even ill-informed views on the relationship between law and spirituality and ontology, so to speak, which is precisely why I believe that this particular conference's theme should receive greater traction, and I hope it triggers and generates multiple conversations across the country, because this is precisely, if I may say so, at the heart of several disputes and several civilizational conflicts or several cultural clashes, so to speak. Because one of the questions that most cultures end up asking themselves is, if I believe and I subscribe to a certain set of values which have their origins in, let's say, a certain cultural and spiritual experience, why should I suffer the imposition of, let's say, an alien principle which has its fount in a different ontology altogether, and which is perhaps not just different, but diametrically divergent to my own set of beliefs? That is a question, according to me, which is at the heart of most debates, cultural debates. And this, according to me, if I had to take Samuel Huntington's position forward, is the meta level of the clash of civilizations. So therefore, when one society chooses to impose its values onto another society, or it chooses to universalize those values, most people see that as simply imposition of values, and most people at best see that as imposition of a culture. My point is, it translates to imposition of something even more fundamental, which is both spirituality and therefore ontology, or ontology and therefore spirituality. That's precisely why I think there needs to be more discussions around certain principles, such as when we assume that common law is universal, especially when we keep saying that Bharat is today a subscriber, so to speak, of common law principles, and it belongs to the Commonwealth of Nations. What do we actually understand of the word Commonwealth? Do we know what it translates to? There are several English judgments, including Privy Council judgments and subsequent judgments in contemporary era, so to speak, where they are very clear, the courts are very clear that common law traces its origins to what they believe is the revealed religion, which is the religion of the colonizer. So from principles of common law to principles of natural justice, simply because it is given the universally acceptable phrase, which is principles of natural justice, we end up believing that it is universally applicable. But is there a scope for subjective interpretation and application, or let's say distillation, so to speak, or distillment of principles of natural justice, which vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and which accommodates their subjectivity, so to speak? This is something that needs to be seriously discussed. Unfortunately, it so happens that, and I'm trying to point to a practical issue here, that some of these issues today are sidestepped in the interest of transactional convenience and perhaps integration with the global market, because the global market seems to function at a certain established pace and within an established parameter, or let's say within established principles. So to upset this so-called established order is a tall order in itself, and it takes it's a Herculean task. Simply because I ask myself, how many people today are actually taking up LLMs and PhDs in jurisprudence? And how many people are actually taking up LLMs and PhDs in cultural aspects of jurisprudence and philosophy? And when would we start seeing an attempt where native philosophies and indigenous philosophies and non-Western philosophies will start finding traction in the mainstream discussion, so to speak? In this regard, one of the things, perhaps a bleak ray of hope, as oxymoronic as it sounds, a bleak ray of hope, happens to be the 12 movement in international law, which is the third world aspects of international law. But even there, the problem lies with the usage of third world with reference to indigenous communities and non-West. And from whatever little I have seen, even this movement of trying to accommodate and include indigenous perspectives in the formulation of international principles has served more as perhaps a diversity contribution, which is to say that maybe some people would want to showcase the fact that we too are inclusive, and therefore we have given certain indigenous cultures and representatives of the non-West a seat at the table. But has it translated to formulation of principles which are truly universal, which means whether it has accommodated points of view and subjectivities of other culture, leading to a fairly balanced hybrid, as opposed to a hybrid that is significantly lopsided in favor of the West? That is a question that I don't think has received an honest examination of scrutiny. So therefore, I can't underscore and I can't overstate the importance of this particular topic. And I seriously hope that students of Campus Law Center take this initiative, because the best part is Campus Law Center Delhi has come out with this particular subject, which I would have expected from perhaps certain national law schools. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, which clearly tells me that the thinking in this particular faculty, so to speak, is in the right direction, and that bodes well for the future. And I hope this translates to multiple research papers exploring different verticals. Because believe you me when I say this, and I hope I'm not resorting to hyperbole or exaggeration when I make this point, the relevance of this topic in future debates at every level, at the political level, at the spiritual level, at the philosophical level, at the social level, at the religious level, is going to be self-evident. So I hope that the organizers of this particular conference, as well as the participants, provide the thought leadership that is expected, because you have anyway proved to be the primer of this particular thought. So I think this is something that needs to be explored. So this translates to very specific investment in legal education as well, which is to perhaps revisit what is it that we wish to teach students when we impart education with respect to jurisprudence. What are the different philosophies that we wish to expose them to? From my own limited experience of being a product of a 3-year LLB program, and since I'm not a product of the 5-year integrated program, I'm not in a position to comment on the nature of the curriculum there and their experience. So I'm going to limit the scope of my position and its validity only to what I have been through, which is to say that there is very, very little emphasis on indigenizing the jurisprudence curriculum in Indian legal education system. In fact, the national education policy, which was put out for public comments, has only just one paragraph, I think paragraph 16.7, which is dedicated to legal education. But there is not a single whisper whatsoever of increasing the diversity of legal education, and therefore fundamentally changing the fundamental building blocks of legal education in terms of what is it that we wish our students to learn. It's surprising that we have professors from abroad fantastically quoting and reciting verses from the Bhagavad Gita with so many layers of interpretation. But I'm not sure we would find the same number of people, even from Bharat in the current generation in terms of students, who can do so with the same degree of confidence and comfort, notwithstanding the fact that this happens to be native to us, or in the sense, at least this culture is the most proximate culture that can lay claim to the that particular heritage. So this points to a serious need for revisitation in terms of legal education itself. The thing is, whenever we think of law and policy, our approach starts with a very top level thinking, which is to say, let's change the judiciary, let's change the policymakers, let's change the approach to policy making. But it starts with legal education and then it moves up. In fact, a ground up approach, so to speak, would be much more consistent with our own cultural thinking, because you see, Bharat as a civilization has not believed in the European version of a top-down approach, where law is laid, let's say, is prescribed from the bottom, or let's say from the top and imposed at the bottom. And there is a certain degree of ecclesiastical approach to that particular form of thinking. Whereas here, it has been truly democratic. It has been truly public in the sense that a custom which receives significant traction from the society is the one that ultimately gets codified and prescribed as law, to a significant extent that puts faith in the conscience of the public without treating them as depraved, degraded, wretched sinners who are condemned to rot in hell without, let's say, the doors of salvation being opened to them through a particular institution and through a particular deity. So given that we have very clear principles of how is law codified in the first place, because most people see the smritis and the shrutis in, let's say, the Christian mold, where they end up thinking that the Smritis are laws which are prescribed by someone sitting at the top. No, that's not how it is worked. Smritis are actually a fantastic combination of certain prescriptive and descriptive practices, which is why to treat them entirely as laws, so to speak, may not be right. And there is significant literature in this particular regard. In fact, what we have done is we have observed, since Bharat as a civilization has always been such a diverse and a vast civilization, both geographically and consciously, so to speak, and philosophically, so to speak, it's not possible to adhere to one set of laws. So what is it that most of our Smriti makers have done is that they have observed empirically the practices which find acceptance in a particular society, and they try and codify those practices with a very clear caveat that this changes from place to place. So there is a significant degree of subjectivity that is accounted for, and therefore no particular Smriti can be upheld as one particular framework which was universally applicable even within the universe of Bharat, so to speak, the political universe of Bharat or the civilization universe of Bharat. So when someone tries to pick up one Smriti and says, this is the representative of the whole and soul of your society, one, you have not understood how the society functions. Two, you don't understand how the framework operates. Three, you don't understand the concept of law varies from place to place. And the concept of top-down imposition and bottom-up acceptance are two very different things altogether. That's precisely why the ontological foundations, the epistemological foundations, and then the theological foundations, followed by the social foundations of law, are the multiple layers at which one must look at the principle, and let's say the way law evolves. Law is perhaps the last mile and represents not the cause, but the effect. It is effectively the last mile in the journey of a particular thought. From philosophy, let's say from ontology to philosophy to spirituality to religion, from there to law, the journey is vast and it takes a lot of time. That may not be the case anymore today, simply because we have a regimented structure of legislative policy making and so on and so forth. But even then, you must try and draw from your own sources. I'm not saying please turn a blind eye to good ideas and innovation that comes from elsewhere. That's not been the policy of this particular civilization, and I don't think it should be the policy henceforth either. But at the very least, only that law which is closest to the native impulse will always find acceptance in practice and application. Otherwise, you'll have any number of laws being written and passed with people paying scant regard to it when it comes to application, compliance, and obedience. So we are not looking at obedience of a particular law, we are looking at acceptance. Obedience is a construct which is significantly alien to us. We are looking at acceptance, and acceptance is possible only when it is emanated from the society itself, when it has emanated from the heart of the society and from the spirit of the society and is animated by the impulses of that particular society. So on this aspect, a fair degree of abstraction is called for, and the ability to relate that abstraction to very practical, tangible results is something that I think this conference should hopefully generate. Unfortunately, I'm short on time. However, I will try and contribute at the very least a short paper of sorts in the coming days, hopefully, subject to my schedule and other commitments, so that I'm able to at least present before such an enlightened audience and such an august, informed audience my own thoughts on this particular subject, in the hope that it triggers a few conversations, even though it may or may not be accepted. So that is something that I'm very, very seriously interested in. And I hope the participants of this conference, the student participants of this conference, within and outside the Campus Law Center, take jurisprudence very, very seriously and try and bring diverse perspectives on jurisprudence and try and incorporate Bharatiya darshanas and philosophies as part of the discussions on jurisprudence, because one that is bound to bring out the diversity of spiritual thought and ontological thought the moment you start having those discussions. And I, for one, would love to be a great part of that fantastic classroom experience. I wish I'd had that experience. So I'm trying to, let's say, project my own unfulfilled expectations onto the next generation, or at least the current generation. And I hope the students of Campus Law Center actually take it forward, because from whatever I've seen, it's a fantastic bunch of thought leaders, potential thought leaders, who are taking a serious interest in what I believe are path-breaking areas of the law. So I wish the organizers all the very best, and my gratitude to the other participants for having heard me patiently. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sai Deepak. And first, sir, firstly over to you.
Okay, so after listening to the brilliant lecture by Mr. Sai Deepak, I'm reminded of a small story. It's a very small story, but very meaningful. Once a teacher came to his class in a school. He was a very loving human being, and he had his own methods of teaching. That day he came with a few pieces of cardboard, placed them on the table, and said to the students, "Look, this is the map of the world, but I've cut it into pieces and I have mixed them up. Now, anybody who is confident that he can put them in their right places and make the world map should come up." One tried, he failed. Another tried, he failed. A third student went on watching his fellow students who were failing and why they were failing. He watched 5 persons in a series fail. He was the 6th. Then he went and turned over all his cardboard pieces. The teacher said, "What are you doing?" The student said, "You wait. I'm working it out. 5 people have failed, but I've found the key. I have found the secret." On the other side of the map was a picture of man. The student arranged the man, which was far easier a job. On the one side, the man was arranged, and on the other side, the whole map of the world was arranged. That was the key that the clever student had been looking for, waiting to see if he could get some clue. And when the others were arranging the pieces, he saw that there was something on the other side as well. The teacher was indeed happy. He said, "I was hoping that you would come first, but when you didn't come, I understood that you are waiting to find the key, and you have found the right key." So, my dear friends, that exactly is the relationship between law and jurisprudence. And we thank Mr. J. Sai Deepak for having brought it out very beautifully. They are two sides of the same coin, law and spirituality. So whenever we are struck in law, maybe we could find the key in spirituality, and jurisprudence is a way towards that, as highlighted by Mr. Deepak. Thank you so much, Deepak ji, for such a wonderful lecture. And despite your busy schedule, you took time out to come to our forum. Thank you so much. We are extremely beholden to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Very kind of you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sai Deepak, and we are more than happy because you agreed to write a paper for us. So we are lucky in that way. And I just wanted to share one of my experience. We have raised a very valid point because law is something which is going to regulate and control the entire society. But here in India, we follow top to bottom approach. So many times the legislatures are going to make a legislation which is not acceptable to people. And many times judges are going to pronounce a judgment which people are not ready to accept. And then a conflict creates. Now, when we talk about the jurisprudence, which is obviously the soul of law, jurisprudence is something which is missing or not getting, that status which ideally it should receive in the legal academia. And this is something which is very important. And another important thing is when we are going to discuss the jurisprudential aspect, Indian philosophy, that is completely missing. So Indian philosophy, the core value of the Indian philosophy is obviously spirituality, because now it is very much clear the religion cannot keep us connected, keep us united. Language cannot keep us united. Economic interest cannot keep us united. This is only the culture which can bind us. And when we talk about the culture, in case of India, spirituality is the culture of this country. So without realizing the importance of spirituality, we cannot attain the level which we are supposed to do. Yesterday, we were talking about that in the coming future, India is likely to lead the world through its spiritual knowledge, because it is going to be the most instrumental part. So with this, because you have highlighted some very important issue, and you have given a very sincere idea also that somehow we should try to include this spirituality as a part of the legal syllabus. And Raman sir is here. I will request him together. We could work onto this, and we could put some kind of pressure to the authorities to include it as a part of the syllabus. So with this, thank you so much. I'm extremely grateful to you. And now I will invite Arvindaksh Madhavji, who is our partner and who is from Ethiccraft Club, to say a few words. Arvindji, it is over to you.
Hare Krishna. First of all, I'd like to thank all the speakers and participants. So previously, we have done many conferences on the field of science and spirituality. But this is a kind of unique conference which we are organizing in collaboration with the Delhi University Law faculty. So law and spirituality has a unique importance for all the students and law practitioners. So I hope this conference will have a good impact on the students and on the participants. And this will help them to make a good character with the competence, because in colleges and university we learn about how to develop competence, but with these kind of conferences, with these kind of initiatives, with this kind of knowledge, we can get to know how to build our character nicely. And spirituality is a very unique tool to develop that character in everyone's life. So from the core of my heart, I thank all the speakers, Mr. J. Sai Deepak ji and Brian Blodge ji and all the speakers of today. So, and thank you Seema ma'am, Raman sir, and on behalf of Ethiccraft Club, I thanks everyone for coming up and being a part of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhavji. And one more thing, one day I asked a question to my students that for what purpose you are studying. They don't have any idea about the purpose. It is about the character building. It is about the national building. It is about the career building. And even if they are concerned about the career building, they are not sure that with the help of this education, they can build their career successfully. So, you know, overhauling in the education system is definitely required. And I think whatever would be the takeaway from this 3 days conference, that is definitely going to help us in this regard. And with this, now I will invite Kajal. Kajal, it's over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Madhav sir. And I also would like to thank Mr. Jaisai Deepak for very eloquently pointing out that there is definitely a need for native and non-Western philosophies to find traction in the discussion areas in the student community, and especially the student legal community. And today we have had a great lineup of sessions, keynote sessions delivered by Justice Ashok Bhushan, Justice Iqbal Ahmed Ansari, and Senior Advocate Mr. Ashok Mehta. We also had a very interactive, interacting session by Mr. Shubha Vilas, the international motivational speaker, and Ms. Vasanti Pillai from South Africa, pointing out how there's a crisis in the legal profession, and she laid a pathway for us students how we can avert this crisis. And Mr. Brian Blodge from USA laid emphasis on the practice of spirituality in the field of ADR. And then finally we had Mr. Jaisai Deepak, who took his time out to and appreciated and acknowledged that there is a need for spirituality to be inculcated in the education system. And also he very well pointed out about this thing which lagged in the national education policy. And now we have concluded our sessions for today. We come to an end to our day 2 of the conference of International Conference on Law and Spirituality. Tomorrow we have a great lineup of speakers on day 3, which will be the final day for the conference. The keynote sessions will be followed by a valedictory session. The first session we will have Professor Makarand Paranjape from Jawaharlal Nehru University. We will also have Mr. Senior Advocate Mr. C.S. Vaidyanathan, and the current ASG for India, Mr. Vikramjit Banerjee. And we will also have Seenu Joseph, who will be addressing, who is the menstrual health educator. And obviously the much awaited session by Dr. Vivek Bindra, who is again an international, who is again a motivational speaker of international repute. And then finally at 12:30, I would like to just inform everyone that please do join us for the valedictory session. In the valedictory session, we will be having Sri Gopal Krishna Goswami and Mr. Vinay Tanna from United Kingdom. And the chief guest for the valedictory session is our esteemed alumna, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhiji, who is the Minister of State for External Affairs and Culture. We are very thankful that all these esteemed guests will be joining us tomorrow. And I really would like to thank each and every one who participated in this conference today, who viewed and acknowledged their presence on YouTube. We thank each and every person who has commented and given passed on their appreciation on YouTube and Facebook and WhatsApp and Telegram and Twitter. We are very thankful to all the organizing committee, to Seema ma'am, Raman sir, Madhav sir, and the Ethiccraft team, and the student committee of CLC, who have been tirelessly working, creating a social media presence. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I conclude this session, and we will see you all tomorrow in the last day of this International Conference on Law and Spirituality 2021. Thank you.